And welcome to the Savannah Chatham Board of Public Education Fall Retreat. We are pleased to be able to come back to one of our own facilities again, because it always is my favorite thing for us to come to Oakland Island. And you know, since COVID, I haven't been out here. And the last time I was out here, one of my pet peeves for a long time was the ramp in front was an old boat ramp from a dock. And Vanessa's been working on that for me for a long time. We got a new ramp there that's just beautiful. So, but welcome to everyone. We always look forward to retreats because it gives us as board members a chance to interface and interact with staff so that we can work for the good of our children. And over the last few months, because of all that has been going on, many of you have said this would be a good retreat topic and we need to add this to the retreat. We have taken every one of those that we knew about and tried to incorporate it into our agenda. It may not be named exactly what you had when you said something, but we are the big general topics we think will help us cover all of that. As you see, our real goal here, actually starting backwards first, it has been traditional since we had our problems with the State Board of Education, with the state accrediting body, to try to do a little bit of a board training every one of our retreats to let them know that we're still on target and doing what they told us we needed to do. And so tomorrow we have Phil Hartley coming to lead that for us. He's such an outstanding, experienced leader that he always does a good job for us. But today we'll be talking about workforce. We've heard a good bit from board members about equity and workforce and all of that. And so that will be in today's list of things to do. We'll also be doing some visioning about how we would see our workforce to develop and where we need to go with that. Article 4, item 4, really has to do with continuous learning. There's been a good bit of discussion from all of us about lost learning, catch-up learning, or whatever you want to call that. And we had a specially designed summer program called Embrace, and we know that really is not totally different from sort of year-long learning. And so we're going to be doing a lot of talking about learning and how to make certain that our students are moving forward rapidly, catching up, and then moving forward like they should. And then the last thing on the agenda for today is the way forward and our strategic plan. We'll be talking more about that tomorrow, but that's our agenda. I have asked the superintendent, and she asked me to say this to the board and to the staff. This is a time when staff should be interacting with everyone just like they do normally with each other. So often in board meetings, staff just presents to us. There is no give and take and interaction. That is not the case here at this retreat. So I am reminding everyone that if you want to think of it as this, we're all equals around this table, so everybody gets a chance and is appreciated for what it is they have to say. I say again, what a pleasure it is to have the opportunity to work with all of you. I continue to be so proud of this district, and for those of you who earlier this week had the opportunity to be at S2 to see the flag of teaching and learning raised because of what Sherry Dennis has achieved. I believe firmly that Sherry Dennis needs to be commended for everything she has done, but she is only one representative, and we have probably many more like her that could be honored her so much. But she did a marvelous job, and it gives me great pride to know that she belongs to all of us and works so hard for the children. Dr. Beth?
Oh, good morning, everyone. I'm just saying, happy we're able to make these arrangements to be in this one space outside of a regular board meeting. It's been, our calendaring has been quite a challenge for us. We have a busy week next week, I think, on redistricting. And then before you know it, it'll be time for us to also have our next board meeting. I love the topics for today. I think they're informative. But like Dr. Buck and I agree, and we've heard many times, we need an opportunity to talk and to be heard, not lectured to or presented to. So I ask the staff to provide information in a succinct form, and we'll follow the presentations with giving you an opportunity to ask clarifying questions. What, when, where, how. Our presenters will give brief answers, not because we don't want to do everything, but we think the power comes in small group conversations. And we're looking for that feedback. We're really happy that the way forward 2026 has been approved by you, so we're going to spend a good enough amount of time looking at that. Everything good should be about that in one way or another. So it is about visioning, broadcast the pandemic, but also getting that critical feedback from you during this time. So I'm really excited about the work groups and the processes, and we're looking forward to hearing the feedback from you. We look at these really important topics. I'm hoping, Mary, is checking with Dr. Burnett about later on. So we are
Ready to go?
right.
And-
Maybe if there are other topics or updates that you need to provide, maybe that goes along the way.
Okay. As we introduce Mr. Ray, I would ask you to say to you, and I forgot, you do not need to pull the mics over toward you. You are being recorded. This is strictly to get the overall, and so it's picking up, the whole thing's being recorded, but you don't need to move the mic over questions. Welcome, Mr. Ray.
Good morning. I'm going to make that one stand close to the mic. I'm talking to speakers. This topic is near and dear to me. We, as board members, we've been discussing this for a number of years, and so certainly 5 years later, it's good to have a different conversation about this. The comprehensive compensation analysis 5-year pay plan update. That's really go forward what it used to be under. There's more to workforce priorities than pay, but it's important. I want to make sure that we have that discussion and understand the importance of everything else, not just compensation from the standpoint of paychecks that people receive. What is often overlooked? The benefits. Our benefits. That's often overlooked. What do we provide to our employees? So here's some of the things that you can see that are SCCPS paid. Social Security. Many of our districts around us and many other districts don't pay into Social Security. So what employees end up doing, they come to us the last 2 years. We get that a lot. We get a lot of employees who come to this district the last 2 years so that they are able to go out with Social Security. Life insurance. Superintendent approved 2 years ago that we raised the life insurance to $20,000 per employee, and also $5,000 for a spouse, and then $5,000 for each child. So that's something that is new for the last 2 years we've been doing, and actually came at the perfect time for our employees if you think about what's going on with the pandemic. So this was prior to even thinking about the pandemic that this change was made for our employees. Employee Assistance Program, you understand what we do with that. TRS, PRS, we pay into that. And just a few things I want to point out purchasing power, employee options. So employees are able to purchase products as if you would do like on Amazon, but it goes through direct deposit. So they're able to pay it that way. So yes, they can make a choice. They see the amount and they may decide, rather I can afford this, I'll pay it a different way, but they don't have, there's no interest or anything charged when they do it. So it comes through our system, so that's good. Employee perks, we have a lot of employee perks for businesses and others that people are able to enjoy as well. And then the traditional options, employee benefits that we have. In 2016, when it started, the board was presenting to the time at the board the dire straits that we were in at that time, because at that time we had, as I'll discuss, many employees that had not received an increase in five years, or at least five consecutive, or 5 times that they did not get an increase. There's no COLA increases. There were a number of things that weren't happening. To create a system in 2010 where everybody did not get a pay increase, it necessitated pulling over $2 million out of the teacher scale. Well, if you ever look at our teacher scale, it's not even. So it pulls $3,000 from this person, it pulls $2,000 from that person, it pulls $1,000 from this person. But it did get to over the 2 million that we were accomplishing, but it really did set us back when we came out of the recession. So this is what we did accomplish. We started doing the local gap, to address the local supplement gap that I just mentioned, from 3 to 11%. So that's kind of the gap that was there, 8%. Between one person's increase and another person was 8%. We're closing that gap now, but we're not there yet. Incentive pay for critical areas, we've been doing that. Just been helping us getting our math teachers, our science teachers, our foreign language teachers, our special education teachers. That's ongoing. Equitable pay, step increases for all. Thank you, board. You've been consistent with doing that. The only year we weren't able to accomplish a COLA was last year for 20, but with the pandemic and everything else. But every other year we've been able to do a step and a COLA since 2016. We restored the frozen steps for all impacted staff. So I was mentioning, majority of staff did not have a pay increase, or at least non-teaching staff did not have a pay increase for 5 years. That was resolved by 2018. And then this year, as you can see there, I'll discuss that in a minute, but I'll discuss objective fact. Well, what were the barriers? You can see these were the barriers that we had. Number of increases that occurred. We had state health increases, we had teacher retirement system increases, everything that you could think of that was on it. We had the governor that wanted to do the 3,000 increase for all certified staff. All of those things were our challenges with being able to continue. And then of course we had COVID last year. So, remember what I just said about the objective, the last objective, which was the 5 to 1, or 2 to 1. So what we were doing, if somebody had 3 years experience, they would come in, they'd make it to step 6. So we were doing 5 years for one step for every 5 years that somebody had. On June 1st, that changed to 2 steps for every 1 year experience. One step for every 2 years experience. So that was a significant change. Well, what did that do to our current employees? You can see the average bike driver, how that changed from their 5 hours to 8-hour driver from last year to this year. You see that significant change that what we just did, or what you just did, occurred on June 1st. That's the significance of where they were in May and where they are today. Certified staff, as I was mentioning, we still have a problem with our comparability to other districts, particularly districts outside. We haven't been able to really target that because of those barriers that were mentioned. So we haven't been able to get to that fully, but we've been making incremental progress. Showed you this was actually data from FY21. We'll be updating the new data that's for the board report that we do in November on competitive salaries. But you can see where we are compared to other districts.
Correct.
Yeah.
Do you know where we are in relation to Effingham and Bryan? Do you know where they are?
Effingham, I'll get that. That's on this chart, you can see the Effingham. Now, this is last year, you can see where Effingham and Bryan are. Bryan doesn't report to MRESA, so we have to get the Bryan data differently. Effingham does report. In other words, MRESA, Metro RESA asked districts to report their salaries. There are about 60 districts in Georgia that do. Bryan is not one of them. So we have to get Bryan and other counties differently. But you can see where we are on this particular chart with Bryan and Effingham. And Liberty and Glen actually are there too. So you can see we have some work to do on many of those areas. But I provided that to you, just wanted to make sure you had it. These are some of the larger districts, comparable size to us, and so you can see where we are with those as well. And of course, the largest districts in the state, you can see where we are in that comparison as well.
Mr. Ray,
Yes.
to your comment a moment ago about our comprehensive benefits package, do we have this analysis that salary plus benefits? Especially for our region. I think that's, I know we need to look at comparable size districts, but when we're looking at choices that a teacher might make of which county in our region, I think that'd be very interesting to see if that's information
Okay.
that might be good.
We can try to look for that, absolutely. So where are we going? The way forward, and I think that slide is skipped as I was going through. I'm sorry, that was earlier. The 2026, that's where we're going. That's what all of this is about. That's how we have to look at what we're doing right now. We have to look at it in that context. Where are we going to be in 2026? So 2021, we did a 5-year plan. Look what we accomplished in the last 5 years. Look what we've done. Just think of what we can do in the next 5 years. I know Mr. Kaczmar has been chiming all the time about making sure that we are up to being the 10th largest district, comparable salaries, so that we are able to get the brightest and the best. And so we've incrementally done that. We've incrementally made those changes, but now it's still, we're not there. Now may be the hardest part. I said that the 2-to-1, the 5-to-1 to 2-to-1 was going to be the hardest step that we had. The reason why was because all the other steps, everybody could justify, because it was, I didn't get an increase. You're giving me, the current employee, back what you took from me. The 2-to-1, the 5-to-1, the 2-to-1 was different. This is going forward, giving you something, it's not something we took away from you, this is something we will give, we're restoring to try to fix a wrong that was done 40 years ago. Just accomplish that. We just did that on June 1st. And I think that was the hardest one for us to do, was because it didn't have any employee come to you saying, do this. You just saw that we couldn't hire people. You saw that we weren't able to recruit or anything like that. You saw that. That gets back to what we're doing in 2026. We're going to recruit, select, retain. That's what we have to do. But to retain, you have to have a good salary. To recruit, you have to have a good salary. But you also have to have that work environment and the ability for us to make sure that we're positive and making sure we're keeping our employees. Yes, how?
What is our average salary for custodial staff? I think comparison for the bus drivers.
Well, I'll get that for you, but it aligns as far as their grade 6. So instead of being the average of 4,000 as we saw with the bus drivers, maybe 3,500 or something like that. That was the increase between one and the other. Certainly we can use some. I'll get some positions and then give you the averages and let you know the average how it changed. One significant change that we made was the median. So the median last year for a bus driver, using that comparison, was actually $3,000 less than the average bus driver made last year. Well, now the current bus drivers are at the median. Now that's on the right side of itself, but it may take 10 years, 15 years as we start hiring lower end. It's just right side itself. But you can see how significant that jump was that we just did, was to put most of our employees into the median, which is the midpoint. So that was actually a good step for us to do at this time. As we look for going forward, we grow our own. You saw last board meeting we had a resident teacher on it. Well, that's part of our Georgia Southern program. And that's what we do. We're trying to make sure we're having avenues for our paraprofessionals and others to get into teaching. We have over 200 paraprofessionals with a bachelor's degree, trying to give them ability to do something else. The problem that they had in the past was they have to go student teach. When you student teach, you can't be paid. That decision, you just can't do, especially if you're single. You just can't make that decision. So we're trying to find other ways for employees to be able to progress, to get promoted, and at the same time, keep their standard of living and be able to become a teacher. So that's what that program is about. And of course, some of the others, we have our Teacher Leader Induction Academy, same thing with principals, assistant principals, SSO to SRO training program, and then driver training program that we have as well. And I'll close with, where are we going to be a premier workforce by 2026? We must continue what we started in 2016. That's 10 years. But again, look at the progress in 5 years. Look how our employees are. Look at what we've dissolved. The morale that we used to have problems in 2016 with people still feeling like you took something away from me. I'm 5 steps away from where I should be. Other employees, other new hires are coming in outside making more than me. All of those things that we heard, don't hear anymore. They used to come to you as a board a lot. How do you hire this person making more than me? And well, he was frozen for 3 years. The person outside, we still do the experience verification thing. That was what was happening. So here we are. We're going the next 5 years. So let's look at, as we go back to objective 1, 2, and 3, continuing that, but expanding it, not just looking at pay. We have to look at our work environments. Our associate superintendents is a great team. I would say I would work very well with this team, probably better than any other team that we've had. And so certainly we together are doing a number of things to be able to change the culture that's occurring in school. But we know in order for us to keep employees, they have to be happy. They have to feel like they're wanted, and they have to feel like they're respected. But then, so that's what we do now, and I think we'll continue to do that. What do we want to do? We want to be the 8th. We want to achieve to be the 8th largest district in pay for teachers. Well, we're a long way from there. In many cases, we're 16 or 20, so that's a long way to get to that point. And unfortunately, 2% COLAs will not work. So it's something that's going to be tough things we have to decide in the future, because when we're doing 2%, Effingham is doing 3%. We do 2%, Brian's doing 4%. So we're never catching up with our 2%. But every time we do a 2% COLA, it's almost $10 million. So we struggle with doing it. But the reality is, if we want to make progress on the scale, we have to find a way to do more within the scale. We're still going to be, as I was mentioning, closing that gap within our scale so that teachers have equitable increases. I used to get calls all the time where teachers said, "Thank you so much this time of year, because this is the first check for teachers on September 15th. I didn't realize we were going to have such a big increase." The reason why is because we were filling that gap within the scale. So that teacher, the prior year, they only received a $200 increase, and then the very next year they get $1,000. Because we're now creating equity within the teacher scale. What we did back in 2010, we did what we needed to do budget-wise, but it just destroyed us related to our teachers in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. My question is about the status of AIDS. Can you tell me what AIDS, achieving that, what does that mean?
Yes,
What's
so
magic about that number?
good point. We are the 10th largest district in Georgia. We feel that we need to be competitive with our counterparts in other districts that have when we're hiring teachers. When we're out recruiting, we're one of the highest starting salaries. That was something that we did, but then you fall off. So achieving 8th puts us in the rank where we're looking at APS, or you're looking at Cherokee County or Henry County or Forsyth County. We're there. Instead of being down with some other counties that when a teacher is looking for a job, they're not even comparing us with. Yes, cost of living is higher to be in Metro Atlanta, but when people are comparing, they're looking at where I want to live. They view us as a metro area. So they view us as, okay, I'm comparing Atlanta versus Savannah. And Savannah has a lot. We're 3.5 hours from Orlando. We're 3.5 hours from Myrtle Beach. We're kind of 3.5 hours from Atlanta. So we're actually in a good location for people, and we're at the beach. So that's all those things allow us to be able to recruit, and that's why we get our teachers. But we also want to try to lessen that, making a decision based on pay. That's kind of what the aids will get us to. We're not going to be as high as them, but it lessens that decision when somebody's trying to make based on pay where they want to live. Yes, ma'am.
I want to come back up against a little bit. And it's good that we are looking forward to ways to increase our salaries for each person that we hire. But my question always comes to where everyone's coming from. Maybe that's not you to answer, maybe Mr. Jackson will pick it that. But where do you get funds from? Go back to the raising of taxes and all that stuff.
Well, I would probably think you probably have raised that same question in 2016. And so I would just say that we have to try and we have to look at what we're doing, just like we did, look at what we were able to accomplish. The frozen steps, hey, employees did not think we're going to be doing it. People would say, what are y'all doing that presentation for? It's not going to do anything. We're not going to be able to accomplish that. You're just giving us false hope. Well, we were able to accomplish it. I think if it wasn't for the barriers in science, I think that's where we weren't planning on. We weren't planning on TRS to go up to 21%. We weren't planning on State Health. State Health told us that the hourly employees now, we pay as much for our hourly employees, $940 a month, as we do for a certified, for health insurance. For health insurance. So State Health said no, they were going to be at $500. And then every year it went up. Now it's $940. So those are the barriers that occurred that we would have been able to make some hard decisions. The superintendent always charges the cabinet to let's start with the top. What are our priorities? We kind of start with step increase of everybody. Then we look at COLAs. And then we look at what else can we do within the budget. So what happens in those years? Well, there's the barrier that comes in. Well, TRS takes over this. The other one that you probably make sure you saw was, we had the shooting that occurred in Florida. So that also drove us to, nope, we got to have security vestibule, and it's a good thing. I'm just saying that there was a priority that shifted. So I think if we didn't have those barriers, we would have been a lot further along. But we have to understand those barriers are natural. I mean, nobody planned for COVID. It's here. We don't plan for these things, but we can try to work around them and work through them. And I think as a board and as a superintendent and as a cabinet, we've done that. We've worked through them incrementally. We've done what we could when we could. But one thing that the board always did was kept it up here. It was always at the top. And by keeping it at the top and keeping our focus at the top, if we may not get there, and there are many things that we didn't do over time, but we did do a lot of it. And we did do most of it. So we just have to continue what we're doing to make more progress the next 5 years.
I think this is not exactly a follow-up, and maybe someone connected it need to respond to this. Our teachers that are being trained under the Georgia Southern system, are they actually going out and recruiting males to join the
That's a good point. The males in the profession of teaching has always been a challenge, but certainly that is something that we do as a district, and I think Georgia Southern, it depends on what they're doing as far as their student enrollment, but we as a district certainly focus on making sure we're as equitable as possible with hires, whether it's race, gender, everything. We're trying to work through making sure we're equitable for all of it. But I can't speak to what Georgia Southern does. But a lot of what Georgia Southern, you know, the ramifications of what happened in Savannah, you know, I came through Savannah State. Well, what we had to do in education was to go to Armstrong. That wasn't an option for my parents. When we had education at Savannah State, we were able to go through that pathway. So, and males, particularly in elementary, are a challenge, but you know, we still don't focus necessarily on males, but we focus on making sure we're hiring the best teachers and expanding and recruiting in at HBCUs virtually, so we do a lot of HBCU recruiting too as well.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Bush?
Oh, I guess the question I have is, something that we don't talk about very much. When we talk about the individual employee base of the categories, for 2026, are we anticipating that percentage-wise we will still need the same number of teachers? Or are we hiring new areas that are needed, like technology, or are we seeing any change in the overall type of employee we're using?
I think one big change that I see that goes through the internal audit all the time is that I often get a question that often comes up in audit committee is, why do we have these problems with this secretary at this school? And many times the secretary's new. And so the question is, well, why is this new secretary struggling so much? And the answer is right in front of us. We have, and you just did this too, we have a computer system that was installed in 1990 that we use to run payroll. And so when you have a person that comes from school and they're using the GUI interface computers, and we put them on a blue screen and tell them that you have to remember QRTE and QSDE, and you don't, there's no drop-down menu to help you. You have to remember the code. So yes, I think that is a indication, Dr. Buck, of the change that we're making, because we're going to have a modern system now. And so yes, even in technology, I know Joe's representing Dave, but we didn't have a network security area 4 years ago. That a team that just does nothing but monitor our network to make sure that people are not trying to get in. And it has caused us inside frustrations, just the same way I guess when after 9/11 was flying. We get frustrated because now when we're logged on outside, we just didn't log in. Now we got to go through all of these hoops to get in. But we recognize if we don't, somebody else can get in easily and take us down. So we accept that. That's, but we didn't like it when it occurred. None of us did. We have to go through all of these steps just to log into the network. But that's the change. I think our workforce is going to change. I think what we think as a teaching is changing. I think the virtual that we did has changed the dynamic of our teachers and what our teachers thought they could do. I remember we have tried to have principals meet virtually in human resource. We used to do that. We were trying to force that. Had reluctance in it. We had one principal that was at Rice Creek said, "Oh, you're telling me we can go virtual? I don't have to drive an hour and a half to come in." So those type thought processes, once COVID hit, and we all were virtual. So now nobody has a problem. Now actually our challenge is this really in person or virtual? Do I actually show up to the meeting or not? That's the challenge that we have today, is making sure it's not a virtual meeting because we're expecting it to do that because we're able to effectively have those virtual meetings. We hired every teacher last year virtually. Every one of them. So that's a change. Our principals are not comfortable with doing that.
I think if I could just add to the conversation, we have already started looking at principal skill. We will need a different skill set for our principals than we have had before. We've always recognized that principals are supposed to be able to make good decisions, handle instruction, manage instruction, manage the environment, and we are finding that in this period, we really need to select principals differently. That there was a skill set that we were looking for, and we typically relied on how the person did in the interview. We know people who really do not do a good job in the interview. They have a good work record. They come to work, they're able to relate well to their students, they understand how to prioritize, and we didn't hire that way. We hired for whoever had been in the seat the longest, whoever had a relationship with certain key people, and people like them.
Okay.
And we have to go away from that. They have to be technologically savvy, they have to have good bedside manner, they have to be able to juggle priorities, and they have to be able to make sound decisions based on the data they have in front of them. We looked at our current list of principals, we recognize where people are. So there's a different skill set, there's a different skill set for teachers. We couldn't imagine hiring a teacher right now who'd never used a computer. Couldn't imagine that. So the way we evaluate candidates has changed, and with all of our support personnel, we've seen changes in that area as well. So it's definitely a different measuring stick that we already been tinkering with, but the pandemic forced a change.
Thank you. That's what I was hoping you'd say. I also, though, would like, we've done a lot of talking this year about the social, emotional needs of students. And it appears to me, at least on a broad spectrum, that we continue to hire a nurse, a counselor, a social worker. And it seems to me that basically kind of where we need to go is one who combines the skills of all three of those areas that can serve kids both as a nurse, as a social worker, and a counselor. And that might be hard to do at first because there's no training grounds for those. But we have talked for years, Connie in particular, about, so few counselors in our district and all of that. And it seems to me that the needs based on shootings, COVID, everything else are needing something different from the average counselor, nurse, social worker that we've had in the past.
I would fully agree, and I think that we've had a partnership with Chatham Safety Net, and so there's a lot that they've been doing with suicide prevention. There's a lot that they've been doing with counseling. So you're right, and they provided that free service to us, and and our counselors, our nurses are trained, social workers, counselors, and the more that they start being trained together on things, the more the overlap you'll see. And so I think that was kind of our start of seeing that. And certainly I think that's going to continue. It's going to be a different person than 2026 that we see today. What are going to be those things that we see?
If we could push Dr. Ballot and Dr. Marrero at the two institutions, because you've already got social work program at Savannah State and things like that, but if we could push forward with that, we could come up with something new and different.
So recently, we looked at that structure for high schools. We realized that our students were having some challenges, especially at our high schools we returned. I think everyone was aware of what was going on. So we added dean positions, but not from a arduous process discipline referral. Our deans, in partnership with the Mediation Center, are being trained so that they can actually do restorative practices.
Right.
And they're going to have additional training so that they impact the culture of the building, understanding that that is their first line of preventive measures, and working with our students and building those relationships. So they're not just there to handle the discipline, but they're there to create a support structure and change the culture of the building. So they're getting specific training, and then they're going back and teaching those strategies to the staff to help them as well.
Right, I like that.
I really believe Kirk put me over here next to these attorneys.
They're gonna interpret for you.
Anyway,
hold her down.
I've been on the board about 9 years now, and it occurs to me that I'm feeling very comfortable. I love everybody here, and, you know, things are great in some instances. But then I think about looking at us from the outside, from a curious person who, you know, is not a part of the establishment. And I have some questions, starting with the experience verification. I just don't understand how it could be legal, and this has been with an improvement, that I come to you with 16 years of experience, but you're allowed to pay me for 8. You have all the value of my 16 years. You're getting the use of that, but you're compensating me as though I just had half of that experience. How can that possibly, Mr. Holliday, be legal for us to do? And especially when you think it used to be 5 to 1. How in the world, in 2021, can we do that and not think that we're doing something kind of not illegal, but immoral? That's my first question. Secondly, we talk about $44,000 is where we are for a beginning teacher. We want to get to $46,283, $2,683 per teacher. And that's something we're hoping to get to in 5-6 years from now. Why should it take us that long to do that? If we as a board felt the hubris that we could roll our millage rate back. I mean, when you roll your millage rate back, that's saying, hey, we got this, we're doing great. We can give the taxpayers this money back, even though we're already helping you with these plots that we don't have to float bonds, but let's give them this back. How can we do that on one hand, and then on the other hand say, it's gonna take us 5 years to get our teachers from 44,000 to 46,000. So, I ask this as somebody who loves the organization. I truly do. I worry about our custodians. We can't pay them what we're paying them and expect them to do the job we want them to do. Unfortunately, and I mean, everybody knows this, my husband supervises custodians, and once in a while, he doesn't know, but I ear hustle. And I hear them complaining and stuff that he has nothing to do with, but I hear their complaints. And it bothers me, because I said, I'm on the board, and I should be bringing this to everyone's attention, that we're losing people to SCAD, and we're losing people to other industries because we're not paying them. If we have the money, why are we not using it more to make sure we get the best and keep the best? As opposed to this, we have the money but we cry poor. Or if we don't have the money, then how dare we roll back the military? So that's a lot, not just for you, Mr. Ray, but that's the kind of thing I think us board members need to be thinking about, and not just sitting kind of happy that, you know, things are going as well as they are by the grace of God. So anyone who wants to answer any of that?
I think, Ms. Hall, your question is a good question. I think it's a matter of this board deciding that that's going to be a priority. We're at the point now where we really need to put you into small groups so you can discuss those items, because we have an opportunity here to hear your feedback. I think the way forward 2026, as the broad goals kind of laid out, it's those objectives and those suggested actions that will help us move to that point. Anytime you have a budget in your house or any place, it's a finite amount of money. And if we're going to lift everybody, then something has to come out, or we have to shift our priorities. But I think it's a good question for you, for the small group you're going to be in, to lay out some possible actions that helps us move in that direction. So you got three of them.
Well, I'll try to, because I think it may be helpful for the group as to understand what I'm about to say about Ms. Hall's first question. Yes, we went from 5 to 1 to 2 to 1. What I didn't explain was in 2016, I actually presented 3 to 1. 3 to 1 in 2016. So Dr. Levette and I had a lot of conversations after she became superintendent about how do we at least move it incrementally. Getting to 1 to 1 would have required $20 million. You know, it ended up being 8. So what I would say to you, Ms. Hall, is that that's what 2026 is. We also have to look at each employee. So we really would need to hire a company to look at Ramon Ray, how much experience does he have? We weren't able to do that. We didn't have the capacity to look at 2,000 employees to see what is your exact experience that you have. That's what it would take. When we do that, and the superintendent and I talked about that, then you can go to 1-to-1. Because we know how much Ramon Ray is supposed, where Ramon Ray is supposed to be placed on that scale. Right now, we don't know it. Sometimes we don't have that history when they came in. There are many problems with just knowing the experience of Ramon Ray. A new Ramon Ray getting hired? Yes, we have it. But Ramon Ray from 15 years ago, we may not have it. Because we weren't looking for it back then. We were placing people 5 to 1. We weren't trying to figure all that out. So that was our challenge with going 1-to-1. And I do agree, by 2026 we need to do it. We have 1-to-1 on our school nutrition managers. 2-to-1 on school nutrition managers as well. 2-to-1 on admin. I get those inquiries all the time. I get people that, so that's the 2026. That's the next step. That's what I'm saying. 5 years from now, in 2026, let's be able to say, all the scales are 1-to-1. And let's be able to do something on the lower.
If we had a teacher right now who took time from us, they're supposed to be working an 8-hour day, and we find out they're really just working 6 hours, or one of our truck drivers goes and parks and goes to sleep for 3 hours. We would say they were stealing our time, and we would fire them. I'm looking at it from the reverse way, and to say that we can't go back and see what Ramon Ray's experience was when he came to us, I kind of don't understand that. You came with 0, I guess, Savannah State 0 experience, but if you had come with 10 years experience and now you've been here, 15 more years, I don't understand the difficulty of finding that out. But I don't want to belabor this, but I do ask at least that our board members start thinking more about how we're compensating our employees and how we're going to lose our infrastructure. Those people, the custodians, those people, the food service people. If we don't have them, we can have Harvard professors teaching our kids. The system is going to collapse.
But I have to say this. I don't know how many years we were at 5-to-1. It was accepted practice.
In the 80s and 70s.
It was accepted for decades. We were able to this year, based on really COVID relief, to move to 2-to-1. We were trying to get 1-to-1 because we believe in it strongly. I've been here 8 years. We have been 5-to-1 until June of this year. And other people in this room have been here a lot longer than me. For decades, we did that. When the people who benefited from the move to 2-to-1, they didn't even realize we moved to 2-to-1. So we were able to go back and make that adjustment, and they saw that happen in June. I think it's a matter of us making a decision, but also recognizing there's a finite amount of money. It's going to take money to get to that point, and then when we get to that point, we need to be able to sustain it. That's the other side of it. So sacrifices have to be made somewhere. And I think most of us lived through the Parkland shooting, so the next year we've got to hire SROs, and Chief Enoch is constantly talking about us remaining competitive. Nurses, we compete for nurses. We're one of the few districts in the state that has a nurse, has made a commitment to have a nurse in every building. Do you know what nurses cost now? Some of our nurses, they worked in the market, they were making almost $175 an hour or more. So we pay special attention to this piece. We were not able to move to 2-to-1 without your support. I say we continue to work to get to 1-to-1 for everything, but recognize that there's a price tag associated with that. So we'll have to figure out how to either increase the coffers, which you will either see a great pushback on, or you have to reprioritize and decide something that money's going to come from someplace else. But I want to make sure that the movement to 2-to-1 came after decades of work. And so we're
I
doing it.
recognize that, and I thank you, and I'm embarrassed that I sat here in 2016. I have been here a long time in 2016, and really think about it, you know, that 5-to-1 what that actually meant. But Dr. Levesque, you say we need the money and stuff, but the 9 of us sat here, it was unanimous, and voted for a millage roadway. That baffles me.
I have Dr. Hoskins' plan, Dr. Howard Hall, and Dr. Catchmore real quickly, and then we must break into small groups and we can continue this discussion in small groups.
Thank you. I turned my mic off and then when I tried to turn it on, it did that. All right, so, my comment, I hope is fuel for the small groups. I agree with you. I sat and I heard our conversation about how the pay scale worked. To me, some decision, some agreement was made a very, very long time ago that this is how this system operated. And there's another part of that about our lower earning employees that still persists that I think we need to be consciously agreeing to or re-examine. And that is that all of these lower paying jobs, people have more than one job. Our budget and our system is set up such that it's expected that they're having another job and they expect to have another job. The pay scale for them is not set for that to be their one job, a living wage for that one job. And so consequently, that is the agreement that folks come into those positions, and we accept that. And when you say, Ms. Hall, like, you know, if we were to take pay back from someone who was sleeping in their truck, and I'm gonna tell you that this is fantastic. I see people sleeping in their truck by the morning. If they were caught doing it, we would take that pay back. I think the difference is that when you sign on to a contract with the district, you are signing on to this pay scale. You're signing on to this conversion. You're saying, I agree to this system. That doesn't mean it's awesome. People did that in sharecropping too. They agreed to be a sharecropper, even though it was an absolutely terrible, oppressive system. So I agree with you that we should be looking at mechanisms to change our system over time, but I was aware of how we were doing it. I didn't understand what our limitations were. The last thing I'll say on it is that we've made decades of promises, not just decades, scores of years of promises financially to different members of the community. And we feel obligated to keep those promises around the services that they get from us. And then that fee is paid by other people in other parts of the system. So there are luxuries, and some of them are needs, but some of them are luxuries that we provide in other parts of the district and other experiences that are being subsidized by our lower earning employees.
Yes, back to comparison as it pertains to other districts. Do you know whether or not we have SSOs and SROs and nurses? Because that is a healthy part of our budget. And I ask because I would like to know what they're sacrificing, in order for them to increase their coverage.
Very good question, and I think Chief, we're aware of a number of districts that do have SROs, not many that would have an SSO, but many districts don't. May let Chief think about that a second and chime in. Nurses, important thing to know, we have the fourth largest, listen to me, the fourth largest number of nurses. There's only 3 other districts in Georgia that have more school nurses than we have. That's significant. But that was a decision that was made a long time ago, that we will have somebody that is trained at each school. Other districts, Gwinnett County, they have 10 RNs, and they have what's called unlicensed assistants in each school. Unlicensed, so they're a paraprofessional or whatever is administering medication, caring for diabetic children. Not in this district. So, yes, we have some expenses that we have that other districts do not have. And that's a clear example of one right there, our nurses. Chief, do you want to comment anything?
I do. Ms. Hall, could you repeat the question just one more time?
No, it was just that you were saying, compared to other districts, what other districts have SROs?
All right, so there are several districts that have, they call them security officers. In our name, we call them school safety officers. But security and unarmed security and armed security is very common throughout, especially in the big districts. The role, it depends on the district. You know, we have a district that has a flavor of urbanism, rural and suburban. You know what our challenges are across the district. Safety is a big issue. What we saw when we built our security system out, we looked at the needs, and based on those needs, we saw, for example, that most of our schools didn't have security vestibules. Screening for weapons and guns were critically important, and they still are. Things that are happening in our schools right now, those school safety officers are a big part of the safety of that entire school. And so when we built our security system out for our district, we saw that how critical that role is to make sure that our schools are safe and that we prevent contraband from coming in. Every school system is different. How they utilize school safety officers, unarmed and armed, because armed officers, there's something they can and cannot do. If you are a security officer, you can enforce policies of the school, whereas the officer by law cannot enforce school policies. They enforce the laws, but together they work together to help make the school environment safe. So it is a big portion. Now, several years ago, the community and this board decided that school safety was a priority, and millage rate was raised so that we could help make our schools safer. And we've done that. We've made tremendous progress in accomplishing that goal. We still have work to do. We're trying to sustain that as conditions change. But yes, it may be a significant part of the budget, but I think it's an important part. In school safety, having safe environments are critically important. We decided, and just to point on, I'll make a comment again, we decided that this was the best way to structure our security funds to help keep our district safe, based on the conditions that existed at that time.
Let me go back to Paul. Yes, so yes, we spent a lot more money than other districts on what we just mentioned. And we have also school counselors and social workers.
Yeah.
Don't forget them. We have more school counselors and social workers than we used to. Not sure the exact comparison, but we certainly have more than we did prior to 2018.
I think it might be helpful that Chief, we provide a list of the districts that have the officers. Because the other districts rely on the city police department or the county police that the sheriff's office to provide support. So I think it's important to point that out. And then I know we've done a salary comparison with some of those districts. That might be helpful too.
There's catch one, then we need to break the group.
Thanks. So, like Ms. Hall, I've been here for a while too, and I'm a veteran in some of these conversations. observations and talking points, I guess. Number one, hiring is market driven. So, you know, for years, we advertised positions at certain salaries and people filled them. And sometimes we hired any warm body that came in because we needed to fill a position, and other times we hired talent. And that's just it's not unique to us, and every organization has the same issue. So the only time we really start fretting about what we pay people and what the benefits package is or are is when we're not getting production out of those positions or we can't fill them. But for the most part, they're market driven. As long as we're treating people, similarly situated people the same, you know, there's no law that says you have to give X credit for Y experience or anything like that. It's market driven. Now, whether that's the right thing morally or ethically, that's a different discussion. But it's an important discussion because what our priorities are as a board drives those decisions. But legally, we can offer whatever we want, and if somebody takes it, that's what they sign up for in this Dr. Hoffman's point. Second, when we were discussing the pay plan back 5-6 years ago, one of the issues we discussed was if we think a premier workforce is our number one priority or top priority, we should not think about it from the bottom up. We should think about it from the top down. And we discussed setting a policy that said every year we will start budget discussions with a 3% COLA and a being a top 8 district or top 10 district at every pay level. We can start there, and then we start the budget discussion with, okay, if those are the starting points, we need to find $17 million this year. And then that is where we start the budget discussion. Instead, we don't do that. What we do is start from the bottom up. Hey, we want to get our janitors paid more. Hey, we want our bus drivers paid more. Where do we find the money? And then it's, let's raise the millage rate. Let's cut this program. But that is, we have a $400+ million budget. Taking one little program and saying, let's cut that so we can find $1.5 million, to me is the wrong way of looking at it. We should be setting the priority up here and then looking at all of our other decisions that feed our priority. For example, the SRO nurse question, well, we have 55 facilities or whatever that number is now. Everyone has an SRO and a nurse. That's $120,000 a year, $150,000 a year. So now we're combining 3 schools into one at Rose, right? So maybe that's 1 nurse and 1 SRO at that school. We've eliminated 4 positions because we're down to 1 building instead of 3. Every decision we make has a structural impact on the budget, and that's one way that we can try to impact some of those decisions. And in terms of how we pay for things, it's not just do we raise the millage rate or do we cut certain programs or eliminate certain programs, but it's also the structure of our workforce. You know, is that a board function? Is it more operational from Dr. Levette's point perspective? One position that pays $130,000 a year is the equivalent of 3 positions: a teacher, a janitor, and a bus driver. You know, so how do we? And I'm not saying we eliminate higher positions to add in lower positions. I'm saying that's all part of the process and how we decide how are we going to fill these positions. If we want to raise the salaries of people at the lower end of the earning scale, well, one way to find the money, it's not just raise the millage rate, it's not just cut athletics or cut music like other districts are doing. It's what's the structure of our system that gives us the best bang for our buck. So if we want to as a board, set the priority. Premier workforce, start the conversation every year with a 3% COLA and being top 8 at every pay scale, and then we talk about how we get there, looking at everything we do in our $400 million budget, not the one sheet, here's the 3 things that cost a lot of money, which one do you want to cut? That's not an effective way to plan long.
Wish we could go back 12 months and start, because I agree.
Well, we still can't. I mean, it's not, just because we did it that way forever doesn't mean we should keep doing it that way. And we're not, we're not a motorcycle. We can't pivot like that, but we're also not a big lumbering aircraft carrier. I mean, we can pivot quickly if we need to. As we did last year when Dr. Levette said, okay, today we're in person, oh, tomorrow we're virtual, let's pivot. And we did it, you know.
It seems to me like we did some of the things that you said budgetarily at some point over the past 10 years. So we've devolved into a more narrow process, but I think we did some of those things that you mentioned
Early on.
earlier.
And then we
Could we, Kirk, you want to give us instructions now and give us some time to plan and all that?
Thank you, sir. I will divert the floor to Madam Superintendent, who will review very quickly page 2 of your pink sheet for your breakouts, and then I will assign your room.
So we've made one adjustment to the group assignments. Ms. Hancock, the Hancock will replace Mrs. Bill Kegler for Team 4. Here's your task. You will have about 30 minutes to get it done. Here's your task. You will, in your group, decide who's going to fill those roles that are listed there. We will quickly review, although I think we've had some really good conversation about the PowerPoint. We have lots of clarifying questions and some good discussion. Through your small group discussion, we want you to provide the following recommended actions. 2 to 3 actions, 2 to 3. 2 to 3. 1, 2, 3. To address immediate needs, so we have a really good conversation here. And then 2 to 3 actions to meet long-term goals. When we say long-term goal, we're really talking about what do we expect to see as a progress indicator by 2020. So we can be talking about further out, like we're talking here, Councilman last comment, really reshifting how we do things so that we can get the best talent. So I want you to think of those 2 to 3 long term. And you can think more immediately about 2020, so beyond that. When you come back, we're going to give you about 30 minutes to do that. When you come back, whoever is your reporter will share your 2 to 3. And we'll hear the immediate first, and then we'll hear the long-term second. And that will give us some good opportunities to determine where we need to go with those recommended actions, how they fit into the strategic plan, and we'll have to have some continued conversation about that. But we want to really have that opportunity here with the small groups that assembled today. Does that make sense?
Okay, workforce visioners. So you see the teams are listed on page 1. And I do want to remind everyone that Mr. Ray has everything packed up for you in that blue folder. This is the presentation that he just talked from. Remember, on the second slide, take a moment to review that. This is the goal set that you just adopted under the Way Forward 2026 for the 5-year strategic plan. So you're coming up with your 2 to 3 immediates and your 2 to 3 long range, taking into consideration some of the talk we just had. Work your best to put them in these categories so that we can align those when we have your feedback. There are marker boards in this room. I'm going to move one of these back to the pre-K cafeteria, which is open, which is straight through that door. And the toddler room is open, which is right here. And then the room way at the other end of the building is the large presentation room, which we had a retreat back there one other time. So, Team 1, you will remain in this room. Team 2, you'll head the long walk down the hall, past the reception desk, keep going to the end of the hall, make a right, you go past the little kitchen, and then you'll make a left into the big presentation room. That's your room. Team number 3, you are in the pre-K cafeteria, so just walk right through this door, and I'm going to move that in there for you. Team number 4, you're right here in the toddler room. So break out, we have 30 minutes, we'll come get you to come back here for your report outs. Thank you, everyone. my phone work?
I can't help it.
So let's give a big round of applause to our Thank you so much. So we're going to quickly, without laboring it, we're going to ask you first for each of the groups. You have a report, you have a reporter. That reporter should tell us like 3 actions to meet our immediate need. We'll hear from support groups, and then we'll go back around and hear the 2 to 3 recommended actions for the last time. And what we'll do is make sure that those are captured, that we capture, of course, through the audio recording, but we'll ask you to give us those, and we can capture those and share them with you and continue to take a look at those. Does that make sense? So group 1, if you will tell us quickly your 2 to 3 recommended actions to meet our immediate needs.
I'm speaking for group 1. Number 1, we want to set a priority to be competitive with our compensation structure. Like I said during our comments, let's begin our budget discussions with an assumption that we want to implement a COLA every year, and we want to be in the top 10% or 8% of districts statewide on a salary scale. I think our discussion was we want to start with the assumption every year of a COLA, and then maybe do an assessment of are we in the top 10% or 8% on a 2 to 3 year cycle. That gives us some flexibility to look at the data and it wouldn't be as huge as a budget hit every year. But if we start with that assumption, and then we're mindful that that's a goal every year when we go into our monthly board meetings and we're voting on multi-year contracts that cost money, we'll be mindful of the fact that that's our goal. We need to find at least the COLA money every year. What are the decisions we're making due towards that goal? Number 1, and that dovetails into number 2, be more rigorous with our return on investment analysis. One of the examples we talked about was every month we'll vote on a extension of contract ABC for XYZ assessment, and it's $1.3 million. Well, it's $1.3 million over the next 3 years or 5 years if we're doing a contract. Maybe if we had some more information on this was already in the budget this year and it's an extension of that spending versus this is an add-on that's going to be more for our budget next year. Do we really want to do this knowing that our goal is to implement a COLA next year? At least having that information will make us more mindful at every board meeting when we're making that decision. So those are kind of 2 short-term. You want to do both? Recommend one?
That's gonna be short term.
Okay. I think that was it, right, Connie?
Yeah.
Ms. Oliver, that was right? Okay, good.
Thank you very much. Team 2.
Pretty sure y'all probably can't do that. So our meeting needs, what we first is to examine the classified grading steps. Because we took away step 0, we actually look at it as for those people who are classified, to go back and make sure that they got that additional step increase because they already had that year of experience with us. We really examine how we're doing it, how each step increases, not just within one department, but over all the departments within the district. So it's equal amongst all of our employees. The other immediately is examine and restructure the budget process. So people kind of like what Mr. Gaspar said. We agree that is where our priorities need to be in the budget because we can have all the policies and everything else, but what our policies really are is what our budget, what our number 1 priorities and policy as we look at it. So we understand that in order to actually have that improvement in retention and also to have everything from student achievement, everything happens from our people and not necessarily what tools are coming in to assess those kids. So we want to make sure that we're taking care of all the employees from the top all the way down.
Thank you. Team 3.
I y'all have to forgive me if I did the short and long term. We worked through, but we didn't probably go through which was short and which was long as we should have. So I think some of these might be depending on other factors. So one we talked about was building on our discussion this morning, that we do offer a lot of non-cash benefits, and there's an opportunity to catalog and communicate those more clearly in both our recruitment efforts and also to the public and communities to understand everything that we are truly doing. And then a part of that is identifying potential for other non-cash benefits based on feedback from the wide range of all of our employees, from custodians to principals to administrative, recognizing the importance of quality facilities for our workforce to work in. And then another one that we talked about was evaluating the potential for some innovative non-cash incentives. And two in particular that we talked about one was affordable housing. So right now there's an awful lot of conversation in our community about affordable housing, so it's a really good opportunity to try and piggyback on some of those conversations, both the Chatham County Blueprint process, as well as the City of Savannah's task force, and they also have $10 million in small spending, where the city is purchasing derelict housing and making lots to be able to repurpose for affordable housing. So can we have some sort of a partnership with our partners? And the second non-cash incentive that we talked about specifically were student loans. Can we do some sort of a student loan repayment program? And couple that in particular with incentives that we'll talk about in our long term, which go to looking at equity and supporting compensation, recognizing that some schools need to have incentives to make sure we are attracting the highest quality workforce we can into more challenging work environments.
Thank you. Before.
No, you can't read this. But our work focused under the umbrella of strategic goal 3, recruitment, selection, retention, and talent development. And our first action, which is both a short-term and a long-term action, we're basically mining what we learned from the pandemic and really expounding upon it and implementing it. So that would be providing a continuous learning and employment opportunities for staff and students. Some examples would be like Twilight, Embrace, SELA, where students could possibly go at their own rate to get the enrichment or the acceleration or to meet some social and emotional needs. But these continuous opportunities can provide more opportunities for continuous employment. For instance, a bus driver working 9 months out of the year, they work during these Embrace programs, they would now be working 12 months out of the year. So really expanding those employment opportunities as well to meet those 21st century needs of our school community. And that's both short-term and long-term. A short-term action, non-monetary incentives, and implementing that in the very near future. Another long-term action.
You finish the short term, Bill?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Long term, in a minute.
It's in the long term.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you only have two.
Yeah, we're gonna, yeah.
All right, so since you're standing, we can start.
Start with long-term. Okay.
Since we're standing, we'll start with long term, then we'll work back.
Okay. So I gave my first long term. So implement a system-wide review to really assess the district's needs and to see what the needs of individual schools are. And then, of course, that would lead into another long-term action, which would be identifying the future roles for staff in the district that meet the specific needs of students in the school community in the 21st century. And some examples of that would be a health specialist, behavior intervention specialist, roles that we never would have thought possible. We would not have thought we needed those roles 20 years ago, but now we do. Also adding a hiring criteria to staff, and hiring staff partly based on their ability to be able to adapt, to grow, and to change into new roles as needed by students and the school community. And as I said, going back to our short-term roles, our very first one on continuous learning opportunities and work opportunities that is both a short-term and long-term. And another short-term we had was that the implementation of non-monetary incentives we've talked about.
Thank you so much. Team 3, you want to give us your long-term?
So one was to, I think a little bit of information from Dr. Rock, work with our university partners to address changing workforce needs. And in particular, we talked about our virtual teachers and really working with students in the pipeline to be able to attract them as we see the needs increasing for our virtual teachers. I don't know if I touched on this one before, so I'll add it to short versus long. But again, it's that comprehensive review of our holistic compensation structure. Our district, and we need to make tweaks to that. And as part of that, are there positions that are currently hourly that need to be salaried? We talked in particular about paraprofessionals and some of our SROs as well. And that would really help in that retention and recruitment area. I touched on this one during our short term, but equity in both support and compensation, in particular for our high poverty, low achieving schools. And it's not only in compensation, but potentially some of those other benefits I mentioned a moment ago, the student loan. So we may have a tiered structure. So for example, if you are teaching in a more challenging environment, you may get 80% of your student loan repaid versus if you are teaching a high performing school, it's only 20%. So there's a tiered structure and recognizing the challenges that exist there. And another part of that is ensuring that we have the training and professional development that's really necessary to be able to support our personnel that are working in those more challenging environments. We really talked about that in terms of equity. And then another piece of the compensation piece that we talked about was as we are looking at our pay structure and recognizing professional achievements and educational achievements, looking at opportunities to recognize non-education degrees. In some of our positions right now, you might have a college degree, but yet it's not necessarily reflected in your compensation. Did I miss anything? Okay, thank you.
Team 2?
Also needs, we put that, we want to have it where COLA actually equals the inflation rate that fiscal year, because it's great to have, for them to get COLA, but if inflation's at 4.5%, COLA's on 2%, they're still losing out 2.5% of their pay for that. We also want to make it so that way that all pay steps, no matter if they're classified or certified, if they're hourly or salary, that all of them across the board are at the pay types of the state. So that way we're not looking at, well, these steps are at this level, these steps are at this level, or hourly they're at this level, salary they're at this level. We want to have it equal across the whole board. And one thing that really wasn't a need, but we want to have it so that way when we do vote on this, whenever we decide to do for a compensation plan, that the board commits to it 100%. Because I remember when I was on board, and the board had just gone over the last compensation plan. I had Dr. Lockley, I had Mr. Ray, and Mr. Jackson all said, well, the board had just they've all verbally said that they're committed to this. I know you're new to it, and you didn't have a chance to go through it, but what we do also committed to it. So I think as a board, it's very important that we publicly state that whatever the compensation plan, the next 5 years is, that we all as a board 100% committed to it.
Thank you. Team 1?
So there's a lot of overlap with previous comments and also short-term goals. Long-term is to have an overall compensation package that attracts the best and the brightest. Right? What does that mean? We pay a living wage, maybe we avoid terminology that people might view negatively. We want to have a compensation package that attracts the best and the brightest. That's monetary and non-monetary comp. So if we have to raise our starting pay to attract the best and the brightest for that position, that's what we have to do. we have to pay more at certain key levels, like recruiting when we get them in the door. Maybe we don't want to be 8, maybe we want to be first or second. Some people make short-term decisions that way. Maybe if year 4 is when teachers start looking around, you know, we know that's a particular time when they start saying what else is out there. Maybe at year 4, we're in the top 1 or 2. But then on average, you know, so when are our retention reflection points? When are our recruitment points? And then for the non-monetary comp, we also agreed with others that non-monetary comp is important. Repayment of student loans, or conversely, for those who don't have any student loans, additional educational opportunities. We will invest X dollars in continuing education. We will help repay student loans. But in exchange, you're going to sign a promissory note that says if you leave within the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, you're going to repay some of that. So there's ways to tie them here, but also give them the benefit so that we both benefit from it. Other things like go talk to our teacher senate. I know one thing I hear from teachers, and I was talking about earlier, it's I know I work for the district. I don't work for a school. And conceptually, I get that. But if I live in Guyton and I'm working at Fuller, and suddenly I'm told, now you're driving out to May Howard, I don't want to do that. I'm just going to go to Effingham and teach there because they promised me I could work at a particular school. So maybe after a certain period of time, you know, you have the ability to say, I've been here 5 years. I now have the ability to not be moved unless there's a dire emergency. There's ways to address retention and teacher happiness that are not just pay related. It might be more of an administrative headache for us, but if it helps with retention, it's something we should talk about. Second, long-term budget planning. This goes back to the return on investment assessment, and one of the things we were talking about was we had a budget committee. We don't anymore, so we don't have these discussions. You know, when the budget process starts, we get a 1-page or 2-pager that says we have to find $15 million. Here are 6 programs that add up to about $18 million. What do you all want to cut? Or where else can we find the money? We don't have, you know, the entire 392-page line item budget for a good reason. Nobody's going to look at it at that level. And part of the issue, I think, with the budget committee meetings we had, were they devolved into micro discussions about, give me a 3-hour presentation on this assessment at X and why, how effective was it. And we want to stay away from that. That's not productive for the board or for the superintendent and staff. Instead, how do you have the budget discussion at a macro level, saying, here are our goals. Here's how we're doing a return on investment analysis. We talked about teachers wanting consistency in assessments. You know, we have 4 different math or reading assessments across the district. If a teacher moves from May Howard to Fuller, and I'm just making it up, I don't know this for a fact, but if you're using ABC assessment in school 1 and now you're doing XYZ assessment in school 2, it's inefficient. They have to learn a new system, they can't implement best practices, and we're spending money in software licenses on 3 different products or 4 different products. The associate superintendent said, we're having that discussion at our level, but the board isn't part of that, and rightly so. We don't need to be in the weeds. But if we set a policy goal of trying to be consistent and lowering our overall costs at the same time, we think we can realize efficiencies, which lead back to we can find money every year to pay for the COLA. And then that leads to our third point, which was intentionality and mindfulness. Every board meeting, we have that, I think it's a blue sheet of paper, that's, were you a good board member today? You know, that's basically what it says. But if we also, every board meeting, said, hey, reminder, here are our 3 priorities from our way forward plan. Number 1, how does the decision we make today in consent, where we spend $50 million every board meeting, or otherwise, how does it impact our 3 goals? And if we're mindful of what our goals are at every board meeting, just that simple reminder, we think we can have some impact. An example I use from work, I'm on our management committee. We meet weekly. Every meeting is, does this add to the budget or is it already built in? And do we want to make that long-term investment? And that's just, so intentionality was the word Ms. Hall used, and that's the exact capturing. We need to decide these are our goals and be intentional about it every meeting.
That's great.
Good job. So these are the kind of sessions that we love because it gives us an opportunity to hear directly, to focus, lots of common themes. We'll type those up and make sure that we share them with you. They also gave staff some things to think about in terms of the budget process and making sure that we're looking at those individual items that are brought to you and thinking in advance of your thinking about it. Will this allow us to keep our premier workforce as a priority, or are we diluting our opportunity to do that by maybe engaging in other ways?
Thank you. I just wanted to add some detail that came from our discussion and also make an observation about the suggestions that came through the group. There are some groups that gave programmatic examples of how to execute some activities that would meet some of the challenges that we've talked about. Some of them gave examples of situations that we're trying to address, like the attrition to Effingham. In our discussion, we focus a lot on process. There's a process, and one of the things that about incentives that I don't think we mentioned, but that I'd like to highlight is that I think it was 2-3 years ago, you used a process to identify non-monetary incentives, and you presented that to the board. And you used business relationships, and you made that presentation when the board asked you to identify ways to support employees while we moved into the compensation, the place we're now in the compensation plan. So part of our discussion was about revisiting that process, not just creating incentives because we know they exist, but using a process to identify and amplify that. And the other process was a systemic review. Is that in order to do the succession planning, in order to have the workforce that we're going to need in the future, we're going to need to identify opportunities to create the positions that will be needed. Like you described how principals, now the search pattern for a principal is not what it was several years ago, that there are new positions being created that have been necessitated by the pandemic. There will be other positions that are now being amplified, like the behavioral interventionist. One of the things that we talked about was using a systemic review of district data to identify what the new jobs are going to be, and then using that data to identify those jobs, and then do succession planning for who we're going to be hiring in the future, and who may be moving into those positions in the current workforce. There may be some persons whose positions become obsolete, but who can be retooled for another position, allowing us to retain talent and attract talent for the new jobs that are coming in. And so I just wanted to bring that up because some of the suggestions are very similar, but the discussion behind them is a little bit different. Some process-driven, some example-driven, some program-driven. I think it's really fascinating that we all came to these same ideas from very different discussions. And I think that is a sign of board cohesion, and that makes me feel very proud of our board.
Thank you. Any other closing comments on this? We will tackle all of them, and certainly we'll probably come back to you and ask you for specifics if there's something you think we need to highlight. To the point of different positions, we developed a behavioral interventionist some time ago because we saw that as a need. The deans is coming out of that, which we've already really run some, those positions have been in place and we've seen the value of them. Mr. Cashmore made the point that some of those things we've done, we haven't shared with you why they're important or how helpful they've been. Dr. Buckner and I were having a conversation yesterday about the fact that we need a health services director. Because right now we have Mr. Ray, Ms. Sandra, they're doing health services, and that is not going to continue that. So we're going to use the ARP dollars to help us put some of those positions in place that may stay there, but may actually go away. We have an opportunity now to put that in place. When you think about the fact that we have 55 nurses and a lead nurse and then some cluster nurses. But with COVID-19, we need somebody to oversee that entire process because we're spending 60-70% sometimes of a day just dealing with cases. To stay open, we need to focus particularly on that so that we can also do the rest of the work in the district. So we're engaging in this process. We're not always talking about it, and I think that's the piece that we've seen this morning and your support of moving that. So it's been a reaffirming for us. Thank you so much. And welcome to Dr. We'll catch him up a bit. We're ready to move that up to teaching and learning strategies. So we'll have that presentation is really going to just share with you some basic, some information, some of the results of the work that we've been doing with observation. I've asked you to keep that this presentation down. What I'm going to ask you to do is let them get through it. And then you will jot your clarifying questions. And then you will have not a group activity, but you'll have an individual activity. So we want you to hear what is in development or already being implemented. We talk a lot about that through the updates each month, but I think you'll learn some additional information today. So if you'll let them get through that presentation, then they will clarify.
And we're running just about 15 minutes behind our tentative schedule. And so if we could plan to be done with this whole presentation, whole activity by 12:15, then we'll have our lunch break at that time, then we'll move on.
So again,
Gotta turn it on.
that always helps. So it's not staying. I use the on switch, it works. Good morning again. Our presentation is teaching and learning strategies, and Dr. Buck, we will keep it quick. We understand we are standing between lunch, so we will. Next, Mr. Childers. So the Way Forward 2026, Student Success, Academic Achievement, and Life Readiness, our presentation and the work that we do is rooted in that and making sure that we're focused on that priority. That's a goal for us. So, how to pivot in a pandemic, the playbook. We wrote that, by the way. We used a number of strategies, and some we saw were successful and we could utilize them moving forward. They didn't just work in a pandemic, and they won't just work in a pandemic, but we can take those, expand upon them, and use them in our 5-year strategic plan. We'll start with virtual. So what we learned was that we needed intense professional learning for our teachers so that they would effectively be able to use technology and have online teaching strategies to support student learning and student engagement. And we did well providing that. But our key takeaway was that we need to continue to do that. I think Ms. Grabowski referenced that in some of her comments, that we've got to continue to provide that to support our teachers so that they grow in that area. We became masters of hybrid. We had cohort A/B, 2-3, 3-2-day rotations, learning partners. Key takeaway, we asked the learning partners. That was not conducive for our teachers or our students and their families. So we eliminated learning partners, but realized we did pretty well at the others in terms of having to move to hybrid. Dual teaching, lessons learned, appropriate technology, and clear expectations for staff had to be established. And our key takeaway, technology resources are needed to truly be able to support our staff to dual teach. And when we talk about those, we're talking about academic audio, video systems so that our teachers and our students have that technology to do real dual teaching, because it does impact teacher effectiveness, thereby impacting our student learning. online tools, Nearpod, Jamboard, Curriculum Warehouse, Vocabulary. We have to prioritize based on alignment to subject areas, grade levels, and content areas. And we did some of that work, and we're continuing to review that. But when we prioritize, we have to make sure that we have the professional development or the professional learning in place for our staff so that they can implement with fidelity. And again, we look at the priorities. What's good for K2 may not necessarily, be good for 9-12 or for 6-8. So we have to examine that. A tool that's great for math may not necessarily work well for ELA. It's Learning, our learning management system. We realized, of course, a lesson, the district needed a unified online platform. It houses curriculum, resources, activities for our students, our teachers, and our parents, and it worked really well. Last year was our first year of implementation. We had a few bumps along the way, but we were able to correct, to shift, and to support our staff, our students, and our families. And of course, we have ongoing implementation support, and we are monitoring. Our instructional support centers, lack of highly qualified staff to provide expected report, it supports. We did run into an issue with that, and we have to work on that if we would continue those in terms of sustainability. One of the things we're most proud of during the pandemic, we started our own Savannah Chatham e-learning academy. We stood this school up in less than 60 days, and it has been very successful. We ended last year with approximately 675 students. We currently have an enrollment of 1,146. We expanded from serving grades 3 through 10 to grades 1 through 11. Our classes are conducted using asynchronous and synchronous instruction. And the future, we are expanding our programming. We're looking at satellite sites and also moving our Twilight programs under our e-learning, which is our now really huge virtual school umbrella, so that we have more consistency in terms of how we are delivering that online instruction to students. We also will be providing in-person learning opportunities. We've started that expansion this year, and some who said they've been on the board for years may remember that when we did Twilight years ago, grades 9 through 12, it was operated at the district level, and it was much more consistent and equitable across the board for students. We have moved the 9 through 12 Twilight up under our e-learning academy umbrella, and then we will be actually moving the others as we go forward.
Thank you and good morning. One of the extended learning strategies that we were really proud of is our Summer Embrace program. This allowed us to have a very focused strategy for providing continuous instruction beyond the school year. We had to address the learning loss that was caused by the pandemic. So Embrace provided opportunities for individualized attention for our students to provide that direct instruction through small group instruction. And this was a very focused effort to reduce the achievement gap that we knew existed. It also provided us with data to start the 21-22 school year, so that way we can identify learning gaps, identify student strengths, and then target those through our work. It also provided high school students with credit recovery acquisition, which ultimately leads to on-time graduation. And it also, our staff and students this summer, they actually got us started with reacclimating to in-person learning 5 days a week. And so they got us jump-started with that, and we were able to fine-tune our processes to make sure that everything went very smoothly. Our students were also provided with camp experiences that allowed them to engage in activities that they were interested in through project-based learning, to continue that learning, but doing it in a way that was highly engaging. We also were able to create SWAP, our Summer Workforce Apprenticeship Program, which provided our students with work-based readiness opportunities right here in the district. So here's what we learned. We had a great opportunity this summer, but there's some key takeaways that we would like to make some adjustments moving forward. We recognize that we need a centralized K-5 common assessment process for our K-5 elementary students. I think you heard today we have various assessment tools that we use, and so we are very excited to have Illuminate. It's a data management system that allows us to have a K-12 data management collection process, so that way everything is streamlined and we can target student performance and address their needs accordingly. We recognize that we probably should have CTAE manage those camps. They've been doing it for years. They have a set of expertise. They have a robust process already in place. And what this does is it allows us as academic affairs to focus on the instruction and focus on content and allow them to do what they do best. We want to avoid splitting sessions. Session 1 ended June 25th. Session 2 ended July 23rd, which is 1 week before teachers return for the new school year. So in order to maximize staff availability, we want to make sure we avoid staff burnout. A lot of staff did not want to work the second session because they were either not available or they were tired. And then 2, also to maximize student engagement. Many of our students wanted session 1, our families wanted session 1, but many of them did not want session 2 because of other family, whether they have family vacations planned, family trips, or so maybe they just wanted a break. So what we found is most of our efforts should have been placed in session 1. And so that's something I think we'll evaluate for next year. So some additional teaching and learning takeaways as we move forward into the school year. We recognize that we have to have intentional support structures to overcome learning disruption. So we had some embrace, but what are we doing in the new school year to address this as well? Well, we're using a data-driven instruction strategy to support student mastery of grade level standards. And then also making sure that we have a consistent, continuous, and common data collection method to support students and identify their needs and then identify the supports needed to address that. So one of the ways we do that is through our instructional focus structures in our schools. So every school has an instructional support structure where we provide additional support through ELA and math. And this is also built into their master schedule. We also provide before and after school interventions that provide students with additional opportunities to get that support that they need. One of the things that is key to our work this year is making sure we identify the SEL needs of our students, but also our staff, and then also provide the specific support to address those needs. And one of the ways we're doing that this year is through Panorama. It's a tool that allows us to identify needs, but it also provides lessons and supports to address those identified needs. So as we move forward in our strategic planning with the way forward 2026, these are 6 key things that we must have in order to be successful as a school district and make sure our students are prepared for the future. Is to continue with expanded wraparound services. I think we all recognize this year that we need some additional services to support our students. Making sure we have college and career readiness. Our students have to be enlisted, enrolled, or employed. We have to make sure that our curriculum is aligned. We must continue to provide additional opportunities for STEM and STEAM education for all of our students, to make sure we enhance and maintain technology in our classrooms to maintain our one-to-one initiatives. And then ultimately continue to work and provide professional learning opportunities and staff development for our staff, which ultimately lends itself to retention of our staff, which we've covered so much today.
And so, we recognize the future, the way forward 2026. We have some key takeaways that happened during the pandemic. We're still in the pandemic, but we're also looking forward. And to do that, we start with our why. And we actually charged our academic and our school leaders in their retreats this summer to revisit and to start with their why. What is your why? Well, it has to be aligned to the needs of the students. And here are 2 good whys, the class of 2035. Questions?
Any questions to seek clarification of what we presented? Clarifying questions.
This is for Sela. Do we have any, with Sela, and it may not be this year because of the pandemic, but when we visited the campus in Gwinnett County, one of the things that really struck me, and I was thrilled to see that they did have requirements for in-person activities for their students, especially the younger ones, and it kind of tiered up. Do we have those requirements, or is that something that we're looking for as we move forward?
Yes, and actually, Mr. Lamb and his staff did a few social activities. They were housed at Laura Woodville, so they were limited, but they did have some social opportunities, and they invited parents to bring students in and did some celebrations of successes. And I think maybe we went a little fast. We are going to be providing in-person learning opportunities, so they're expanding upon those this year. But the goal is to actually use the Gwinnett campus as a model. We did do a site visit. That's how we maybe adjusted to meet our needs, but the idea of bringing our Twilight and all of our other online structures under that one umbrella so that we ensure that our students are all receiving equitable treatment across the district in those programs. And so yes, they are expanding and looking forward to those opportunities.
Yeah, I just think that intentionality that was mentioned earlier is extra critically important for those virtual students, that we are very intentional about their social emotional. Thank you.
And field trips, lab experiences, and also I should mention that our SEALA students at the high school level, just like at our other high schools, they have a work-based learning teacher. They have opportunities for those work-based learning experiences and those apprenticeships. So we're setting ourselves apart and making sure we provide opportunities in our online structure like that.
Can you talk a little more about the role of deans? For instance, are deans just for high school, and what type of person best fits that role for dean students?
So our deans, we have two that are under the title of behavior intervention coaches at the middle school, and the others currently are in high school. That's not to say that that's where we would limit ourselves, but we have additional positions there. And so our deans are certified staff. We also prefer someone who's interested in leadership, because this is a great way to begin that process for them and to actually expose them and begin training them, because we all know we need really good, strong leaders. But the role of the dean is to help establish a positive culture in that building. It's not about just disciplining the students, but it's about conferencing and counseling and actually providing staff with some of those strategies. So our deans will work hand in hand with the mediation center, because we're utilizing them. They also will be over our peer counseling. Principals are moving the peer counseling under our deans, and they'll be trained in that by the mediation group, so they can help facilitate some of that as well. And so the mediation group will be supporting them, as well as they'll be getting training in additional areas so that they are impacting the culture in a positive way in the building. But they're also supporting student behaviors, and they're working with our parents and our families as well.
So there's no conflict between the assistant principal and the dean. They're totally separate and peer roles.
Yes, and our deans do not observe staff. They do not evaluate, right? They do not have that capability. And many of our principals are looking at this as also an ability to grow their assistant principals, because while ultimately the dean, like teachers, reports to the principal, assistant principals will be their on-site supervisor to help that process.
Could you give us a little more information on the K-5 Twilight, because we know that K-5 students aren't that fascinated because of their age, and a lot of parents do want more options for their children to have virtual learning, so could you just kind of build a little bit on K-5?
Yes, ma'am, and great question. So with the K-5 Twilight, it's going to be a little different than in-person learning. We know that obviously. So we have hired teachers to work in the K-5 Twilight program. They provide synchronous instruction from 4:30 until 7 o'clock, with 30 minutes of that time being independent work on the front end. And then the teachers will work with students from that 5 to 7 time period. We also will provide support on Fridays in more of a small group atmosphere, provide assistance for those students as well. And so, I'm sorry, I'm saying.
Oh, go ahead. I was going to give her information on the number of teachers we have working on there.
Come on up. We do this as a team effort.
No, currently we have about 22 teachers that are teaching after hours, and we commend them for wanting to do this after hours after working a full day. So we're very pleased with that. Currently, we have about 125 students that have, well, the parents that have been enrolled and registered their students. So we're very pleased. We have Dr. Desmond Patterson, who was over the program last year, and she's over it this year. And so we've had some very successful meetings with the parents, with the teachers, and with the associates. So it is rolling full steam ahead, and it will start on Monday, September the 20th.
So these schools want to attend school during the regular day, they're just waiting until the evening to have their.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And they also have elective courses that are tied to that as well, so it's not all content. They do provide the elective support as well.
What does it look like for students coming in, going out? Where are there gates or opportunities to come in and out?
So great question, and staff school principals want to know that as well. And we told them. So what we want to do is look at the end of the market year or semester as a trigger for that. So we prevent back and forth movement. Now, obviously, if there's an extenuating circumstance, the principals will look at it on a case-by-case basis, but we want to look at the end of the semester as a trigger point for returning if that's the desire.
And is this something that we are springing from the mountaintop for families, or is this more of a inputting students whose families have been the ones that have been contacted?
Great question. One of the first things we did was target our CELA waiting list students. So those families we knew who expressed a clear interest in online learning. So we targeted that group, and then the other group was more on a case-by-case basis. We have had parents who have expressed the need and desire to go virtual, so we've handled it on a case-by-case basis, but it's not something we're marketing to families openly.
And plus because the teachers who agreed to do this are doing it after the work day, we are trying to keep their loads lower as well. They also have their daytime students. We want that pre-K, that K-5 Twilight experience to be very much the way it was last spring. We had we started out with a big number, and that number went down as we implemented hybrid. So what we want is Susie's in Miss Aikens' class. She's still in Miss Aikens' class. She's just in Twilight at the end of the day. So she's not there during the day. So when that time period is over and she wants to go back in person, she's still in that class. It's just during this time she's in Twilight.
As a child development specialist, tell me how you feel about that. If I'm 8 years old and my school day is at 4 o'clock. Is that developmentally sound for me over a long period of time?
My personal opinion, Ms. Hall, is I would prefer the children to be in school during the day so that they can be with their peers. But we are, unlike other districts, you look at it, there's some districts that said we're not doing any virtual, period. Because they knew that if they had in-person and virtual, there would be this long list of demands of the class. We decided that it would be better for us to get a CELA, make sure that we maintain the integrity of that. But we also felt that there was an incredible amount of pressure based on the person that 500 being on that list. We need to try to do something to ease their mind. The Delta variant is much highly transmissible. We recognize that there are students who simply, their parents just prefer that they have virtual. We can't do dual teaching. We're trying not to do dual teaching by the request of our teachers. So we've offered this opportunity. We've had 100 plus to agree. Now, how long that'll last, I don't know. Because if the numbers go way down, what they'll want the kids to come back to school. So that's why some of my colleagues have said, we're just not going to do virtual at all. We'd rather try this and give parents an option. It's not going to meet the needs of everyone, we know that. But at least we will be on the record for trying and give them some assistance.
Dr. Howard Hall had a question.
Yes, I was looking at opportunities for students who are in quarantine because they didn't reach out. Some of them are giving out in and out, and parents have been wanting to have opportunities
some type of teaching instruction during that quarantine time. It just depends on, I guess, the school, when you have, you know, the rotation of being quarantined 2 weeks, 1 week, 1 week.
So we do have a virtual quarantine plan for students if they're quarantined. Now, obviously, most of it is asynchronous, but teachers are to provide support, uploading resources, videos that help support the content to its learning to provide students with that support. And they also have office hours to check in with students as well. So it'll be a little problematic to have them sort of rotate in and out of the Twilight, but the schools do have a plan to address students who are in quarantine.
Thank you for the report. Since many of the children that are in the regular classes are underage and they cannot take any kind of vaccination right now under 12. Someone asked me the other day, a parent asked me the other day, is it possible, Dr. Vet, for us to put shields around their desks in the classroom since they are so crowded, and to prevent them being from coming out with an infection here at home and they themselves get sick?
We did inquire about desk shields last year, and we'll make another inquiry. The problem was last year, just you could get a desk shield, but it wasn't necessarily effective. So we are seeing more manufacturers of that. Our challenge has been getting enough of them. We'll certainly look at it again.
I think Dr. Buck had a question.
Yeah, earlier this morning and then in the early part of this presentation, we were talking about things that we learned from COVID that we can move forward with. And obviously across the country, one of those things is virtual learning that we had known about but hadn't really pursued in great means. When I talk to parents and to people in the community and to students, it seems to me that to really make SELA cell and other virtual opportunities after COVID is moving on, we need to redefine that product, because a parent usually says to me, I would never ever let my kid do that again. It was the worst experience in my life. Or this was a wonderful experience. My kid learned something. I mean, there doesn't seem to be something in the middle there. And, we jumped into it one day. We went from classrooms to virtual. And it seems to me that in the future, if a kid or parent wants to enroll in that school, I think parents and students, as part of their sort of orientation, ought to like it being done virtually, successfully, to see how to do it, and sort of just, I guess, redefine what virtual learning is all about. Because I think it is the way of the future, personally, for many of our students. But I also think that people have very erroneous perceptions of what virtual learning is.
So, and we have been working on that, Dr. Buck, and working with our parents and a contract, and even what you just suggested, the team just talked about, they need to put out some videos showing what a day in the life of a student at SELA really looks like. Because we started out rocky, we'll admit that. We were all trying to figure this thing out and navigate. And we have some excellent teachers, and Dr. Levette spoke to this about our hiring processes. We do not hire our teachers the same at SELA as the rest of the district. They literally have to go through an assessment and a model lesson to show us that they can handle teaching online.
I got two hands, and I'm not sharing this, but there's two hands over here.
So, I agree, and I think that's a great idea to virtual learning, I think, is a huge lesson for all of us in our communities, and something we've embraced really well. Something else that was embraced by many districts across the country that we've done some of, but we have some huge opportunities to do more, is outdoor learning. And I think opportunities for fresh air. And as we move we look intentionally at technology-free spaces where we do make sure that our students are connected to one another and to the place and where we live and we learn. And so I would love to see us look at opportunities to take some of our American Rescue Plan funds, put those towards intentional outdoor learning spaces. One of the biggest concerns I've heard, Ms. Mines, to your point about our students being together is during mealtime. That to me has been the strongest feedback I've heard. And the place in the schools where we have our opportunities to take the kids outside, that's a really easy answer, right? Can't do it when it's raining, but it's a great opportunity. And so I think that making sure that we maintain that balance and that perspective as we're looking more to technology, that we don't become so hyper-focused. And the outdoor learning and experiences are also so key to that social and emotional wellness. And there's so much research and proof about the value of outdoor experiences to that social and emotional learning that I would love to see that health services director not only look at healthcare, but at the wellness side, which is more about prevention and structural ways in which we are managing that full holistic wellness, which also forces goes to
Right.
So I appreciate the presentations and the learning points, and it's hard to say, here's what we tried, it didn't work, we made it better by doing this, and having that growth mindset, I think, is helpful for all of us. Because the board voted on stuff too, and we're looking back going, why the heck did we do that? So we have a growth mindfulness as a team. I think that's helpful. I'm sitting here, I was listening to Dr. Buck, I've had the same conversations with those parents. I hated it, I loved it. And I'm thinking, one of my kids said, you know what? I want a hybrid system. I love going to school and seeing people and interacting with my teachers in a way I can't do online, but I don't need all the fluff built into a school day. I don't need, the school day can really be, we could really be done with everything we need to get done with by 11:30. I don't need to be there until 2:40. So how do we, what we're really talking about is a customized learning experience for every single kid within a big bureaucratic structure where we can't really do that. And so what I really like about what we've done, I mean, I have family members with kids in other districts in the state who have taken this is the product we're offering, take it or leave it approach. And for all of our, all the complaining we get from people internally, we have offered not 100% customized, but it's pretty close to, if you want to go to school in the morning, great. If you want to stay home, great. If you want to go to school in the afternoon, great. If you want to do some school at Islands and then go to Woodville Tompkins for some welding experience, great. So we're doing that, but I think that's also where we need to keep going. The more we can offer customized education opportunities within the constraints that we have from a budget, staffing, and preventive burnout perspective, the more, the ultimate goal is to keep kids in school so that they graduate from high school and they're prepared for productive futures, right? So the more you offer them that customized experience, the more engaged they're going to be to reach those long-term goals. I appreciate all the thought that's gone into doing that.
So I will tell you that you will see high school coming forth with a pilot. So while we were still in the pandemic, we were still learning from some of everyone. And so we have 3 high schools that are going to pilot very similar to what you just said, looking at alternative schedules. We're going to start with those 3 schools as opposed to opening up district-wide and make sure that we iron out the kinks and look at the students. And we're starting with our juniors and our seniors and looking at customizing, doing some customization so that you may not need to be in school every single day, all day long, just as you said. So working with 3 principals, and we actually will be going to cabinet the first part of next month to share with them, here's our plan for implementation. So we do have that in the works because lessons learned and observing others and doing it well, and just by virtue of what we've done. So we are working towards providing some of those opportunities for our students.
Like I see, Brown.
Thank you. So, I really like all the comments that I heard. One of the things that I find exciting about what we've learned in the pandemic and what you have synthesized for us here is the opportunity to meet so many different young people where they are in the ways that they need to be met. I mean, I had an extraordinary experience this spring. Our youngest son, second to the youngest son, came to Savannah, was in Savannah High virtually, and it was night and day. It was the first time that he'd ever made A's, ever. He didn't know that he could make A's, but the way that the learning was offered, the attentiveness of the teachers, it was changing for him. So he's now trying to get him to say, but he's now in his home district. He has a whole other attitude about what to expect from his teachers in Bacon County. I suspect he's giving them hell. that he is like, holy cow, this is how I was taught, why were you not doing it? But I think there are other implications for other young people. I'm thinking, and I hope this is not like a Pandora's box, but I'm thinking about the young people in disciplinary situations. You know, we have our disciplinary program, and you go to alternative school because you have been expelled for whatever reason. But to me, suspension now looks different.
Mm-hmm.
The suspension experience where you already mad, you got sent home. Even if you did it, you know, even if you justly got sent home, you already feel some kind of way about being sent home. And then you got this envelope of assignment you're supposed to do while you're gone by yourself with no help. But that experience is entirely different with the virtual tools that have been developed. And maybe that isolation, that being taken out of the environment, gives a student who has a behavioral challenge an opportunity to discover some competency, some abilities, some interests that they wouldn't have if it was just about punishment. It might just be about intellectual or emotional time out, which is what suspension, I think, really is kind of supposed to be, that time out that allows them to do better. So I think that the tools that we have may create an opportunity for excellence to come out in a whole bunch of other children where the fluff of the day that you talk about, Sean, like, okay, they don't function well in that fluff. But you get them focused in another way with a different modality. You may see big differences that we had to do before.
So we just shared with our principals, I love it, we all think, in the same line. We do have a program like that we are actually starting. We started yesterday, September 5th, for that as an alternative in our high schools, utilizing the online programming that we have to maybe give them more of a step away, cool off, time out period. That's another one of the programs that our deans will be responsible for, and working with the mediation group and having the mediation though provided and the support structures for those young people before they return to school is built in as well, and looking at restorative practices and making sure that we're able to work with them so that when they come back at a better mindset, or maybe they choose online because they realize it's a better experience for them because we have that option.
That's how it all.
Yeah.
Have we considered a pilot for year-round school possibly? And also, during our small group discussion, we discussed how some teachers who struggle with classroom management did an excellent job with virtual learning, so that may be a way to retain teachers. And those that struggle with the classroom management, they do a good job with virtual learning.
And so currently our Embrace program is our way of conducting a year-long or year-round school, doing a year-long calendar. Currently, that is done through Embrace, and we're targeting those students who need it the most. So that's where our focus is currently.
Oh, I'm sorry, we're morning in this hall.
Yes.
Well,
Technology. I wanted to go back to something that Dr. Howard Paul mentioned about quarantine. We want to make sure we understand perspective of what's going on. You know, one of the things about Twilight and what we're trying to do is kind of standardize. So what happens in a quarantine, you asked about students in quarantine, there are various things that could occur. Pre-K classrooms, frequently, this is the scenario. Pre-K class, someone is identified as being positive in the class because they mingle. Teacher gets taken out along with all the students and the parent. Guess what's happening for the next 10 days? They're doing remote. Teacher's home, parents home, all the students are home. That's happening in synchronous time, not asynchronous. I'm sorry, asynchronous time. So that's occurring at the same time that the person's out. We have other situations, and when you think about quarantine, you have to remember the staff impact that it has. So you might think that the students are going out and the teachers aren't. That might be true. But then we have 6 or 7 other teachers that are out. And then staff are trying to cover those positions. Then they won't have that ability to be able to engage with those students that are out on quarantine, which is why we need the asynchronous consistency of an learning or another platform, so there's a consistent something that can occur with those students, as opposed to what might happen in that pre-K class in other situations. Looking at demo right now, we have a teacher that's out and half of the students are out. Well, she's teaching virtually back from home to all the class that's there because they have a parent in the classroom and the students that are quarantined. But again, that's not something that can be predicted. That's not something that happens every time. But it is something that all of our schools are trying to do based on staffing. It's just a reality. We don't have subs, and this is the best scenario that you'll see. So it's a hodgepodge of things that occur, but it just depends on the dynamics of what is happening related to that particular quarantine or isolation situation.
Ms. Hall and
Just very quickly, I just want to say, I still say that board members are the best allies you have in the community. And we really need to know about important things that are going on the academic side. When we had the academic excellence committee, we were kind of able to keep that flow going. But we need to know when you have, come up with great ideas or not so great. So when we're out in the community getting questions, we're able to amplify what you're doing. So I don't know how we could make that. We sure don't need our board meetings any longer, but some kind of way, maybe during informal, just an update on what's going on so we're aware.
as we sort of finish this up, take your purple sheet and you see recommended actions to meet immediate needs and to meet long-term goals. You do not need to sign these, but just jot down write it where we would understand what you just said as the 2 or 3 recommended actions for long-term and short-term, and then we'll take those up. Okay?
We appreciate the presentation.
Great presentation.
And giving you an opportunity to see kind of our thinking, which is actually done in concert with teachers and principals. So many of the recommendations, many of the actions you see, like when it came to Twilight, we started last year and brought that back this year with Akins and with all of us, so we actually work together on that. But the whole idea of fashioning the school day to have a combination of hybrid, in person, certain times, our visit to Gwinnett counties, online school, we took lots of ideas from that, so that CLO started implementing some of that last year. It also feeds into this idea of the e-learning centers, so that we have an opportunity on several sides of town for people to have virtual learning, but have the opportunity to come in with formal social activities for those students who are learning at home. It helps us tremendously. So if you will, give us your 3, 1, 2, or 3 in those areas.
That's right.
Yes.
One was like such.
Right. Gotta fit in the little box. It appears most everybody is finishing up. I want to thank again the staff that made the presentation during the lunch is over here. We'll take a lunch break and then get ready to begin again. I won't give us the beginning time because I know you can't go too far because I think it's still raining. 12:40 maybe around. That way we might be. It's all excited about.
I just wanted to make sure that you knew that this is typically our outdoor experience with the children. Awesome experience to come and have an opportunity to see the owls, eagles, whatever. Yes, exactly. And hopefully tomorrow's better. You know, walk down to the dock that will be done. It's beautiful. It's a nice place to have a retreat or a small event. So we might want to think about that as well. It's a jewel in our cap.
Really is.
They're really is, I keep thinking about long, long ago when Tony Cook was here. What company was there, so, but,
He
so
gets,
wonderful.
he's very good. Probably.
Do we get much, publicity or information about Oakland?
We don't have a lot of inquiries, but we have lots of people who would then look at the options, especially family owned options, man. This comes up, we have, lots of people in fire removal, so based on the tornado. We have lots of people who want to be notified as soon as we put up on the radio to do that. But it's a really hot spot.
And also, that's what I was talking about, summer camp programs, like all the summer camp, like, parents know, are looking for when Oakland opens up for summer camp. Summer camp.
And going down to the drawbridge down.
I think we see lots of people with that, yeah, some things that all out, right?
Thank you, Grace. And that's another one of our really, I think, lessons true assets.
I've been assured that all of our kids who their social studies.
Yeah, they do.
Get the match.
Yeah.
And I haven't.
They do.
I hope that's true.
Well, that's not true.
What we may do is, because we haven't done it for a while, Ms. brought up before all of us can get the reports in terms of attendance. Participation. It's really helpful. I'm very proud of what we've seen done at Massey, and that we have more, diverse exhibits and openings. We have, much more diverse people coming through Massey and enjoying it. So, and I'm really proud of what they've done, especially with the walking tours. They have deliberately, with intention, covered many more of the various ethnic groups that occupy that have been longtime residents of the area. So, lots of great things. Okay. Ready?
I'm ready.
So we are very fortunate to have approved the strategic plan, and Mr. Austin is going to lead us through a quick review of that. We have that one sheet that we created, a little about your attention to that. There will be a group activity after this. And so we'll have an opportunity to hear the presentation, ask clarifying questions, although I think you're quite familiar with this document. But we want to make sure that we cover everything. We'll have some clarifying questions, and then you'll have some opportunities to meet in your small groups. And you will not, for this task, need to decide on a recorder, because one of our able assistants will cover the recording for you, so that each of you will be able to fully engage with your group. You will hear times, and then it's the same thing. We're going to ask you for recommended actions. We've already done a little of that this morning, but you'll see probably when you're going to be in that report. Mr. Austin, we're ready.
Okay, thank you very much. That work?
I think so.
Okay, great. As Dr. Levent mentioned, during the September board meeting, we approved the mission, vision, guiding principles, goal areas, and objectives of the strategic plan. We affectionately call that the DOS portion. And I like to think of that as the big overarching umbrella that provides the guidance for all the work we do. Everything else that we do falls under that big overarching guidance. So the second component of the strategic plan We often refer to that as the Recording, Evaluation, and Monitoring Instrument. We call it REMI for short. That component is under the purview of the superintendent's administration. So the superintendent's designees will be responsible for crafting those performance measures, the strategies and action steps that will help us meet those goals and objectives. The divisions are already hard at work collaborating in drafting those strategies, action steps, and performance measures. And then we plan to bring this work to the Board Accountability Committee in November for review and discussion, and then we hope to implement our full plan in January. And again, the REMI piece, those action steps and those strategies, we like to think of those relating to the very day-to-day work that each of us do. For instance, an action step in accountability might be everyone in my department has professional learning on Bayesian analytics. That's very specific, very granular to what we do. But it does fall under that overarching guidance. Now I'd like to refer to this wonderful cardstock right here of our plan. So there are two parts to it. In the front, we have our vision, our mission, and our guiding principles. And then right below we have the priority goals and the performance objectives. Now in the back, of course, we have that strategy map, which is again the goals and objectives, but just in a different format, a little more visually pleasing, I think. So again, I'm going to go over our priority goals because that's really going to set the tone for the work that we're going to do next. So priority goal 1, student success, academic achievement and life readiness. Goal area 2, family engagement and stakeholder partnerships. Priority goal 3, recruitment, selection, retention, and talent development. Priority goal 4, fiscal responsibility and resource stewardship. And to the right of those priority goals are those performance objectives, which are really almost subcomponents of that goal. Other questions? And again, those pieces that relate to the reporting and evaluation and monitoring instrument, it's going to be very natural that those are going to be a little bit more granular and more specific to the particular goal area and a little bit more specialized. So they probably will be written in let's say, educator language, if that makes sense, or in some cases, in a finance officer's language. So there may be some terms that might be unfamiliar to some of us because of our experiences. So that's what it's meant to be. So that piece, the REMI piece, is really for the staff to help us hold ourselves accountable, provide guidance and structure so that we meet those overarching goals and objectives. Those boards approved. Yes.
Thank you. This is really helpful, and it's nice to see the culmination of the process. I think since we are approving the instruments differently this year, that it might be a good idea to explain the thinking behind that. If you remember, last year we approved the DIP-DAS REMI as one instrument, and we reviewed it all. Those REMI measurements were developed. Well, they were developed by the team, but we didn't approve it separately as we did this year. So, kind of, could you walk everyone through the thinking about the separation of the documents and why that's a better approach?
Yeah. So again, the vision, mission, guiding principle, goals, and objectives. Again, that's the big overarching guidance. That is the prerogative and the purview of the board, and it's very reflective of a lot of the community input that we receive through the survey, through the focus group. And that's ultimately where we want to go. Those are those high expectations that we've set for ourselves. That's where we want to be. That's our ultimate state, right? That's our future. Whereas the REMI piece, that work is very specific to the superintendent's staff, and it's very specialized. And again, we did that because we wanted to show that distinction, so that we were, very clear on our various roles. That the board and the public, it was important for them to see the overarching guidance. Because again, that certainly is part of the board's role, their role in policy development. But how we get there is really under the direction and guidance of the superintendent and her designees. And again, it's very specific to particular roles, whether it be in finance or HR or teaching and learning or assessment and accountability. And it's really written for the people that do those jobs, and you really provide a roadmap to help us reach those goals and objectives that the board has challenged us with.
Thinking back to obviously my experience with this is all my colleagues being the new Gales board. But thinking back to kind of what we did last year and do we produce any type of an annual report, for lack of a better term, that shows? Oh, were you guys talking about that? Oh, sorry. So I guess that means that some works. But I think that something like that would be tremendously valuable to show all the, because we hear about all these great things, but it's really hard to kind of see comprehensively how they all fit together. And then be great for us board members and great for to share.
I'm only laughing because I think sometimes they're like,
So many of the DOS reports that you get from the superintendents know our annual DOS reports. They are directly aligned to our strategic plan, and we try to do our best to align them. Of course, we do have a lot of reports that we need several pages, and sometimes it's easy to forget that. But very often, every report that comes out is directly aligned, again, to these overarching goals and objectives.
I'd like for Stacy to make the comment about the annual report, which we've been trying to get done for a while. 2 years. I think one of our responsibilities and areas of further development is in telling our own story, and that we do great work. There's great work being done. There are awards being earned. There are recognitions. Just as Mr. Kachmar said this morning, there are lots of things that are happening. You may hear them. They may show up in a publication, in case you missed it, or something that goes out to the general public, but we have not yet produced an annual report. I think the closest you got to an annual report was the document that Stacy created when we had SCCPS by the numbers, and we shared that publication, but we really need to create an annual report. I think the lessons from the pandemic, the massive changes made during the pandemic, are worthy of note. Everything may not have worked the way we wanted it to work, but one of the things that we did was we made a change, and we made it quickly. We wouldn't have been able to do that without the board trusting our wisdom, the lessons we learned by looking at Chromebooks. And that was a big goal for thousands of years, and we would never get from one-to-one. We're now way past the one-to-one piece, but also looking at food. All those things happen, and they happen as the silver linings, actually. When I talk about them to my colleagues, they're like, how did you make that happen? How did you get a broadcast center? How did you get the powerful partnerships? And we take it for granted. We even complain about it. But actually, there are other people who really want to know how we're able to do that. And I think that's the story we're telling. Because we're here and we're living in it, we don't think more about it. So other people look at it like, how did you do it? Our K-5 Twilight program, people are like, how are you making that happen? We're making it happen because we know we want to offer more opportunities for our students. And We don't have more people, in fact, we have fewer people. But we have dedicated staff who are willing to support our children in that way. And so it's really important for us to record that for posterity. And then the next time we have a pandemic, we'll have.
Well, and I think the other part of, I mean, the annual report, I kind of see that as a more outward facing document that can be shared broadly and widely with the community. But I also think more specific to this, you know, we get the reports, which is great, but sometimes it's hard to see how everything is fitting together and how everything is progressing. So almost like a dashboard where we can kind of see just a snapshot of where we are on things. And I know it's going to be high level, but maybe it's a dashboard that connects to those reports so we can dig in and see what's behind it. I think would be really,
Don't we still have that?
So we are purchasing, we're expanding upon the Simile tool, which we hold our policy. And because we're still putting the strategic plan in Simile, we're not ready to show it to you, but by Board Accountability Committee time, we will be able to show you this tool, which will provide almost that visual dashboard that you'll be able to see.
So what happened to the ones that we had before?
The previous reports.
No, the dashboard that the parents were able to see that was highly graphical, when we changed the Chevron report to be
The infographic.
the infographics, yes.
Yes. So those are individual reports.
That was just a film from Gator Rivers.
And I'm just open up I got some malware on it too. We're going to check that phone right now.
Let me pause the recording.
Those reports are actually, we still have those. And again, we still want to continue that work with making that data more accessible to everybody and visualizing a more effective way to tell the story. Because I think that's what you're talking about, is taking all this massive amounts of information that we give you, but making it very cohesive and telling the story in a way that anybody can understand. I think that's where you're going with that.
Yes, collecting meaningful, quantitative data for family engagement has always been a challenge. And during our session, our family session that we had earlier during the year, we talked about Power School by tracking parents that are actually engaged in Power School, because if they are engaged in Power School, they can track, if they're tracking their child's progress, that can lead to parent conferences. So have you all thought about how we can use that quantitative, meaningful quantitative data for parent engagement as opposed to the number of workshops, the number of activities?
So that certainly can be a component, right? That is so you're talking about the logins of parent portal usage.
Right, because a lot of parents, they're unaware of what's going on until it's time for the child to receive the report card. So maybe that can be a way to actually engage them into being more proactive with Power School. That's great. That's a great way to collect data as well.
And we're trying to also use that alongside bit smarting, because the two talk to each other. Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that. Not to go off on a tangent, but a lot of the work that we've done in assessment accountability, we use through our Qualtrics tool, our survey platform. And I have the honor of being up here to represent the department, but I certainly could not do it without my fantastic staff. You're also Christy Rylander, Ashley Shiver, as our Ashley Joyner, married, is working closely with the strategic plan. But I have Richardson you're also familiar with, but I have a fantastic team that has really dedicated themselves to lifelong learning, and they've really made all the various features and Qualtrics part of their daily practice. And actually, we have received national recognition. We presented nationally, and they'd like us to be a spotlight district and an exemplar for the nation in K-12 education. And I will be working as we go forward with that. But a lot of the instruments that we've used to collect the data, to analyze quantitative and qualitative data, is from our Qualtrics platform. working on a contact tracing through Qualtrics. And Qualtrics has the gold star, or platinum star of data security, the ISO security, which basically means this commission can come in and inspect you at any time. You better have it together, or else. So it's really the highest level of security anywhere in the world.
I had said earlier that it really helps when the board is well informed and that kind of thing. But I guess I want to add a caveat. We don't want to be burdensome to stay. All the things we talk about and suggest and all that means work. So I guess what you'll have to do is filter and get, the most important things, because I thought about it when we were out at that county breakfast. We're so far beyond a lot of other entities in terms of our board work. I'm sorry, it was just so evident. But at the other end, we do have to make sure that we're not burdening you with too many things. I think all of us agree that we want good product, but we don't mean to overwhelm you, yes, with too much. I think everybody, Dr. Buck, we're in agreement on that.
Joe. So, that's actually a wonderful segue to the stepping off point where we're about to head today with the retreat. But we have to say that in the same vein that in that very concept, the new way that we've gone forward to get to the Way Forward 2026 was really a recommendation from the Georgia School Board Association. In fact, we've been applauded nationally, we've been applauded regionally and by GSBA on the great work we've done for many, many years under the DAS. But when they came in, they said, we want to refine this even further to give your governance body a one-sheet, easily understood from a governance standpoint of the goals that you want to meet that the administration will go and execute and seek to achieve. So you've done that, and that was a big deal. That was a good step forward, and a really strong step forward in the board's process from a governance standpoint that came straight from a recommendation from GSBA. And of course, they helped us navigate through this. Now we're at that very unique point where we have to look at those objectives and align strategies to it to meet that big goal. And then we'll work out the reporting structures back to the board on how we're doing that. And of course, the Accountability Committee continues to play a key role in that granular subsect of that. So we've met administratively to go through the strategy process already. We're not done with it yet. That's why this retreat timed so perfect for us so that we could do that with the board and staff here on that entire document and get things like Dr. Howard Hall just said, which I wrote down. That is an exact strategy to meet a specific objective that goes to the overarching goal under family engagement. So that's what we want to get from you today when we go into the breakout strategies that we'll review in our process going forward, and then you'll see where things land, if we could use them, find a way to use them, or if they didn't fit when we get back into the Board Accountability Committee.
To pay for the COLA and all that stuff we're gonna do, instead of telling all these other districts for free how we got these rates. Can't, like, I think we carve out 10% of Dr. Levette's time to go on the road with her team for a nominal fee, of course, which we'll negotiate, and tell you how we did all these great things.
And if I could say, the work that I did last year, the Learning 2025 Commission, the reason we were invited to be members of that is because of the work we've done. I'm really proud of that. We also will be a demonstration district this year, which means we'll have access to some additional resources. The one thing I tell them is, I have a great team. The team that put the e-learning academy together, we've been called on, I don't know how many times, last year and this year, tell us how you did it. And we really ought to be in the, like when the districts across the nation were being delegated or designated as growth advisors, they put their teams on the road. Their teams became consultants. They worked it out with their school districts that on their personal time, they could be a consultant for someone, for another district that's willing, is trying to do that work. I mean, I don't laugh about it because we give information willingly and people call up, can we use your stuff? Can we use your stuff? Yeah, just give us credit for it.
They not go off to pay for it.
But there are services that we have put together that really are marketable. I mean, relax it, it's serious.
Likewise, and I know we need to move on, but this sounds negative, and I don't mean for it to sound negative. The world knows we're doing a great job. Other districts know we're doing a great job. The people in this room know we're doing a great job. But our community overall does not. And I don't want that to be negative, but I was sitting here listening and thinking about techniques and what Denise was asking for, et cetera, et cetera. I just wish that the people in this community, for the most part, who are paying the property taxes, would be as excited as I am about this. Because they may or may not have kids in school, period. They may or may not have kids in private schools. But for the most part, our citizens are, in essence, paying our salaries because they pay property taxes. And probably less than 10% would say, I am so glad I'm paying property taxes to one of the best school districts in the country.
What do you suggest then?
No. I am saying though that it should be a strategic goal along with the other part, because I post everything I'm sent just about on Facebook and things like that. But the average person will tell me how bad that principal was, or how bad that kid's teacher was, or how nobody downtown would call them back, or all the horror stories that I don't believe half the time, but they've heard it from somebody else. What, David?
People suck.
Well, I agree with that.
No, because all they want to hold on to one bad thing,
right?
And if they aren't impacted by any of the awesome things personally, they could care less. They can't see the whole entire pie. They only want to see the sliver that's missing, and that's what they want to complain about.
Then disregard all that.
Oh no! We can take out our own paper. You wouldn't read it.
No, I know.
I think one, David's not wrong about a lot of people. I think one thing is that our community is incredibly spoiled. They don't even know what's extra. They don't know what other districts don't provide. And we know that about the transportation, the choice transportation. When we kept talking about that years before, it was an entitlement, it's what everyone ought to get. They didn't realize that a lot of districts didn't provide it. Our community is, we've given so much as a district for so long, they don't know. I think that when we're doing better in telling our story than 9-10 years ago.
Oh, yes.
And I think part of helping them understand value added is coming from superintendent videos, the social media accounts, all these things that are pushing forward the enhancements so that you can't miss it. Prior to this, it was, we probably weren't doing it because nobody knew about it. Now, like it or not, it's whether people like what they see in these media, like whether they agree that's a good use of resources, because they know about it and there's a myriad of stuff going out. I agree that we can definitely improve the annual report will probably do that as a public facing document, like Ms. Charleston, you shared that, and I did find some of the infographics online. That's available, but it's not consumable in the way that a public facing report would be, that allows people to get that, get that snapshot.
Well, and I think to Dr. Buck's point, we need to be creative and seek out opportunities where we can tell our story in venues that we're not traditionally used to telling our story. And I think that's somewhat of a disconnect of how we, for example, the example of what we talked about earlier, that we have, Chief Daniel and his team at every single school is a huge benefit to our city and county police force. We don't, that was news to me. The way that relates, and that's not, to Dr. Brown's point, that's not business as usual. So I think when we have the opportunity to plug into the business community or the other nonprofits or the public safety, whatever it may be from a non-traditional education approach, that's when we can start to filter into those conversations and change some of those misperceptions that are out there. I mean, there was a survey that was just part of the comprehensive plan update. It was very disappointing to see the percentage of people reflecting that survey who were now, granted, it's very small percentage of the population, but there are metrics out there like that that show that there is this unwarranted perception, I think, many times.
And how do we go about changing the mindset? Right now, folks are angry, they're upset, and anything you say to them, they take it the wrong way. So where do we begin to make this change?
I think we need, as I've always said, we need to be interested in a PR. We need, in the budget, we need to plan for the James to have a publicity account and get our story out and not wait to have to be
I did not pay her to say that.
That's the way people sell because they use PR, and we need to do that. And I know that's not the usual function of a school district, but that's what we're facing. We need to constantly be putting ourselves out there, our best foot forward at all times.
Mr. Catchman, then let's break into small groups.
I think it's also helpful to put ourselves in the shoes of the people who are looking from the outside in. And frankly, nobody cares that we have Twilight, that we have this and that. All they see is the one social media post, Chatham County, 112 out of 118 in districts in Georgia. Or they see what our academic outcomes are. And a lot of people I talk to who are not involved, some people I talk to who are I've got some people in my district who are retired, who are not in the district day to day. And, their mindset is your job is to have good educational outcomes. We don't care about all the fluff that we're talking about here that we think is exciting. What are your reading scores? What are your math scores? And I look at the graduation rate. Hey, here it is. But that's what they're looking at. And so what can we do to change the mindset? It's to get our lowest performing schools to perform higher. Get our rating as a district, and whatever we're rated on, get that higher.
Right.
Because we're looking at all the other stuff that we care about as consumers or as participants. But the vast majority of taxpayers, all they're looking at is bottom line numbers, right or wrong. And so our messaging is really important.
Very good. One last comment over here.
And I think that goes all back to having a premier workforce. Because if we are the place where people want to be, if they quit jumping the line to Effingham and Bryan, where we train them and grow them, and we make it so appetizing that they stay here, what you're talking about begins to happen, because our best teachers leave us when those salaries get close. When you're living in Effingham, it's a good commute. I lived it. But when the salaries are right, people will drive in for the funding, for the benefits. But when we have the premier workforce, like what we've been talking about, I think that's the first step.
I also think, in all of this, we live in our history.
Mm-hmm.
We live in our history, and we can't ignore that. If you think about the history of the school district, which opened in 1866, you some documents that show clearly how it was designed. We look at the turmoil of the district over the years. Some of that history is still in the district. Some of those people still hold on to that. Even when we're talking about where schools are located, how they get into other places, where the resources are, that district cannot be ignored. We live in it. We actually sell it. We sell the history. That's what tourism is based on. So that's part of it as well. So I think that's the other piece that we have to acknowledge. Just prior to the pandemic, it was simply amazing to me. 40 people down on school buses and went throughout the district to see the kind of programming we had. Stunned. I didn't know we had all this in history. So sometimes it doesn't matter how much publicity you provide. The strong partnership we have with Gulfstream to have an aviation avionics program. Didn't know anything about it. Drone aviation at Windsor Forest. Don't know anything about it. All cinematic studies, Southwest, don't know anything about it. Olin Allen, don't know anything about it. There's math that we put out there. So in some ways I agree with Mrs. Hall that we need to have a very strategic manner of getting the story out. I think we do a much better job with communications and getting the story out than we did before. But I think in the current context, we're going to have to find a different way to get the story out. The social media, one experience, while I might not like it, I have to pay attention to it. Because social media has had a totally different effect on perceptions than anything that is negative. So we understand that that's the dragon we have to fight and slay, but it certainly does help when we have these kinds of conversations about what's really happening, and we're able to model the kind of problem solving with the recognition of current realities that allow us to get the story out, but also to acknowledge when we don't do something well. That's the other thing too. People say, oh, you don't talk about what you don't do well. Well, I'm going to tell you what I do well, but I'm also going to acknowledge areas where we continue to do the work. But we do live in our history here. That is something we have to deal with. But I don't think it's insurmountable. I would like to see us look at, in the small group session, some really strong 2 to 3.
all of those goals across 3 different time frames. Okay, lots of goals.
Yeah, so exactly. But I think this session today has been so refreshing. We actually get to talk to each other about some of the things we'd like to see. We put together the new kind of dash remedy that comes out of this. It should be reflective of some of the things that come out of this session and some that come out of future sessions.
Okay, so it's time to break out. Now, you're not only talking about one particular goal set, you're going to go through all 3, or all 4 of them. And on your handy-dandy yellow sheet, this is our last session of the day, so get all your energies and bring us back to those creative ideas. This one's a little different. Because we're talking about the 5-year strategic plan, when you get into your groups for each one of the goals, we are looking for 2 to 3 action items to meet immediate needs, 2 to 3 action items that you believe should be in full implementation by mid-cycle of the 5-year plan, which would be the close of FY 2024. Then you want 2 to 3 actions that should be in full implementation and achieved by the end of the 5-year plan.
Finish all that by 12 minutes.
Right. And don't wake the possum. So, now, hopefully you can do that for all of these. Now, I know some of us are going to get hyper-focused on certain areas, and if you do, that's okay. They'll bring back really good ideas. But do your best to get through all of them, and then we'll meet back and we will report out. 30 minutes is the time frame that we're looking for. We may extend that a little bit more. You want an extra 15 minutes on that? How's 45 sound? 30's good? We'll try for 30 and then we'll do a pulse check with y'all and see how you're doing. Okay.
That's a goal.
Get on it.
So figure out your strategies to meet the goal on
If you
the timing.
remember, if you think about it,
What's that?
we've already looked at 2 of the areas already this morning. We've got some really good feedback. So what you might want to think about is, okay, we've already looked at workforce priorities, we've already looked at teaching and learning, so you may want to visit those, but you might want to look at the other 2 and spend more time there.
So the teams are on your page, and I'll give you the room assignments. Chief has a quick announcement.
Yeah. Those that will be leaving immediately, I would send some umbrellas in the back. It's still raining out there. There's about 5. If you would return them to campus police in central office, the dispatch would be very helpful. But I have some back there. Those of you who don't have them, it's more than welcome.
Okay, today's a good day for the grass and for the ducks. Team 1, you are at the end of the hall, all the way past the reception desk to the end of the hall, hang a right, and then make a left into the big room. Team number 2, you'll stay right here in this big room. Team number 3, to the toddler room, right here. Back in the toddler room. Team number 4, straight back into the little cafeteria here for the exit. We'll see you in 30 minutes. Yeah, we have extras. Somewhere. Here, you can have Larry's.
Joe, do you have extras?
I've got 1 extra.
Okay.
Each one. Joe, you got any extra?
I have 1 extra.
1 extra, Olivia needs it.
I need 1. I don't have one.
You need 1?
Yeah.
And we're gonna have to share.
Hey, everybody, smile.
Yeah, we can see you smiling, Joe. Right.
Okay. Welcome back, everybody. Those are some very spirited conversations. And having up here some succinct reports. Succinct reports. I do hope you enjoy them as much as you're enjoying them. I think it's, the larger group would benefit from hearing what you come up with. So we're going to ask you to share with us in a summary format what you've come up with. And then I believe you're going to see them again. So Mary and Olivia will definitely record those, but let's give our scribes a big round of applause. They did a good job trying to keep up with all of that conversation that's happening. We're going to start with hearing from, start with team 2 this time.
Johnny must be the representative.
And I do notice not everybody got to everything, but I think based on what I can see, we say that again, make some progress.
They did have these discussions then.
All right. So, while we did not cover all 4 goals, we did cover 2 of them. So one of the first action items under goal number 1 we want to look at is to ensure that there are effective literacy strategies that result in all students reading at grade level by the 3rd grade. So it's very important to improve this. Number 2, we wanted to continue and enhance our before and after school intervention support. We recognize that our students and many of our schools need continuous learning support. We want to be able to continue to enhance that.
And then looking at goal number 3, we wanted to look at implementing a more sophisticated hiring process to ensure that our teachers can relate and build relationships with our students. There was a whole lot more. Talk about cultural awareness, microaggressions, implicit bias, and a number of other things.
That's tomorrow's topic.
Yes. Under goal number 3, having an intentional focus on retention of high-performing staff, especially in some of our high-performing schools. With further discussion, we talked about just having an overall growth. Low-performing schools. Or low-performing schools. Well, we talked about also having a clear focus on having a growth mindset and a growth model that kids and students are growing at all of our schools. It goes back to should be looking at student growth. And then the last action step is teachers who take on extra responsibilities, making sure that they are compensated for the additional work that they provide in schools. So whether that's leadership team, club work, anything like that, just making sure that they're compensated so they feel appreciated and want to do more. And that's it. Thank you.
We're ready for team 4.
Oh, she's jumping all over. She's from the hot seat. She just called
So we kind of went through, and we did not hit everything either. So the first one is we actually something we don't need to necessarily order. So the first one we went over was fiscal responsibility and resource stewardship. We said that the immediate actions that we need to do is survey all the students and staff on SEL needs and create support services based on survey data. By the end of FY24, have whatever we find out from the survey and what services and systems that we put in place are fully implemented by the end of FY24. And then survey again the students and staff, because things will change to people and staff and students will change. And then by the end of the 26th, just rinse and repeat and do it again, because we should already have a cycle like that. The next one was the family engagement and stakeholder partnerships. Immediate needs, do social media community demographic targeting for the audience, for the interest, and really target down about information and news coming out of each individual schools and areas of the county, as well as identify district basic learning platforms. That's like a tier 1 that's mandatory across the district as well. Fully implemented by the end of FY24, do the geo-tracking, targeting within the areas within the county, and identify supplemental learning platforms. So anything above what's mandatory for all the schools, or what the platforms needed for each individual schools for their specific needs. And then by the end of FY26, just do a countywide geo-tracking, geo-targeting within the internet. We do a regional area, and we do compete with Brian, Denver, and county. And then also implement all learning platforms. Oh, yeah, that was it.
Ready for team 3.
All right, so for recruitment, selection, retention, and fiscal responsibility, see this morning. And then for student success, academic achievement, life readiness, and family engagement and stakeholder partnerships, design and implement a social media marketing program that includes students in our SWAT program. Most of the people in here probably use Facebook. Our kids are like Facebook's for idiots.
Right.
You know, they're all on Instagram. I'm just saying, we can hire like social media influencers, but if our kids are out there promoting us to their peers, that's the best PR we can get, right? continue to focus on our core mission and take away reasons to be critical. You know, like we said earlier, our reading scores are low, let's get our reading scores up. Let's take away reasons that people can be critical of us. Better communicating college and career choices and outcomes so that families can envision joining our journey. We talk of, you know, some of the criticism we hear is you guys are all focused on college and you do nothing for CTAE. We've got this amazing CTAE program. Dr. Levette talked about taking those 40 people from the community around. 25 of them were critics who said, you guys don't do anything for the kids who aren't going to college, and now they're singing a different tune. So how do we communicate that? One of the things we talked about was we've seen the Candler St. Joe commercials. I'm a local resident of the community. I had skin cancer. Dr. Smith saved me, and now I can go fishing again. You know, but we relate because we know them. You know, let's take people from our district. I went to the Johnson IB program or the Jenkins Engineering program. Now I'm a rocket scientist with SpaceX, or I'm a doctor at so-and-so, and now my kids are in the public school system. Get our peers to sell our story. Share personal experiences, more intentional interaction with community partners so that they can have interest in us being successful. A lot of our critics are not engaged with us. All they're seeing is the one media report or the one post on social media that has a half-truth, and that's their story about us for the next 6 months. They're sticking to it. But you know what? Gulfstream, which who we have a partnership, JCB, Kessler, you know, Savannah State, Armstrong, we can, St. Joe Candler, we can point to these community partnerships where they're getting something from it. They're getting potential customers, they're getting workforce, and we're getting something from it too. They have an interest in our success and are promoting our success as well. So let's have more people in the community have more skin in the game, and then redefining parental engagement to ensure that it's timely and tailored to community needs. Parental engagement is important, but you know, let's have a fresh discussion about why is it important, and at what stage of a student's career is it important, and recognize that some communities have a different perspective and need of what parental engagement is versus others, and let's define what we really want out of that.
Queen of the best, obviously.
I just want to say,
I'm
I'm so happy to hear people talk about parental engagement. Parental engagement is something beyond, I can short for you nothing.
Yeah.
We had more parental engagement during the pandemic than we've ever had. People you did not expect to hear from, you heard from them. So parental engagement was redesigned for us. That's right. Amen. Okay, we're ready for
One. We did make it through all 4 goals, and thank you, Roger, for allowing me to discuss goal 1 and total 2 because I wasn't here this morning. So inventory and assessments and instructional resources and eliminating unwanted redundancies, kind of what we were talking about before. We've got 7 ways that we're teaching English across the district. If they aren't working, why are we still using them? An early learning academy, South Side FY24, West Side 26. That's taking the forming model that is working and taking it across the county. More career, college, military, the 3 E's, but bringing that, and you could tell me we're already doing this, big fairs, intentional fairs, starting at the middle school level, so that by the time we're further down the road and they're doing it at the high school level at the same, they've at least done 2 large intentional career, college, and military / whatever else. That also brings the community into our district as well. Goal 2 for family engagement. Just an assessment of who are the true active community partners at each school. So I think we have a really good tell on what it looks like at the district level, but what is that at each school, finding the schools that don't have those engaged community partners. And that kind of goes down to goal number, our second goal would be to actually have a minimum of 4 community partners we define active at each school, because I know there are some schools that are a desert for community partnerships. And then there are others that have a multitude. How does the district
come into play to help make sure that every school has an opportunity. Publish an annual report. That was an easy one to steal. And find a statement of the district. So we actually gave you a date you have to have it done by as well, because goals need to be measurable. We can't make motions, no voting. And then looking at how our schools engage the community just in one-on-one interactions. Each one of those interactions have their own ripple effect, just like a social media post. So looking at how parent facilitators can make our more diverse stakeholders welcome with any interaction that they have with the school, whether that be a parent is calling and getting the admin. And then the training that needs to go to be involved to make sure that all of those interactions are positive for both parties. On 3, we just finished a successful compensation plan, correct? Ish? Okay. Well, we should have a new one by 2022. What does that plan look like? And implement it as soon as possible. Explore opportunities for anniversary-based rewards, whether that be monetary, partnership, people donating things at 5, 10, 20 years. Of course, implementation and assessment of both of those by 2024. And by 2020, this is a big one, and kind of hit home on some of your others. Establish a clear DEI policy. Have the assessment. It was nice to have assessment in our group by 2022. Come up with what that policy looks like by 2024 and start evaluating how it's working across the district by 2026. And then for goal 4, establish a budget process / policy by which the district helps board priorities and strategies for developing the annual budget, i.e. budget committee, shopping list, the ways that we've done it, but actually to have a set in stone policy / procedural idea of what that looks like every time, so it's not, well, this year we're actually going to share this, or if the superintendent changes, this is the way it's going to go. If the board wants it a certain way, have it a certain way, and have a policy / procedure for that. Correct? If I'm speaking incorrectly, throw stuff at me. And in keeping with that, establish what that process looks like for the next time we have to do these swaps. Some of you have been on multiples of these, and this was the first time that we did the work group. And people like that, but in other times it wasn't that way. So what do we want that policy / procedure to look like moving forward to make sure that it's board driven when it needs to be and not just who is the changing person at the top. And then this kind of ties back into goal 1.1, how do we use performance to determine effectiveness and resource allocation? And that would come back to the inventory on our assessments and instructional resources. So take the time to look at the data and key performance indicators. And if we're spending lots of money on something and it's not changing that performance, then we need to change it here on the academic side, but then we also probably need to either defund or increase funding if it's making a positive change. Yeah, good? Okay.
I think we've heard some really good, strong suggestions or recommendations. I'll tell you that the budget process is continuing to come up, so we will work on a way that we can make that process meet the needs that have been identified this morning. Engagement, full knowledge of the budgeting process, and then looking at how we make the decisions that allow compensation to also include additional pay and supplements and all that, make that come realization. I think we learned some lessons from that process that we had a while ago. I think we need to go back to some of that if that was useful, and then look at how we manage that process going forward. This is really the time of year, and we really should start looking at the budget. And so I heard that loud and clear. We're going to bring you back some suggestions on how we do that, and then identify those key pieces that you want us to look at going forward. So it's been really helpful for us we want to hear a few reflections, if you have reflections on the day, tomorrow. We have Mr. Phil Hartley in the morning. We'll be talking about governance, and then we'll be looking at facilities for the second part of the morning. So we'll have some presentations, but then we'll have some breakouts as well. So that should be really helpful for tomorrow. But any reflections on today, how the process worked? I mean, Dr. Brooke and I have been talking about the process for today and how we feel about it. So it'd be helpful to hear. If you have comments to make, we'd love to hear from you.
Well, so I really appreciate the structure of the day and the effort that was put into making it flow smoothly and, you know, everything. Set up in the room, food was delicious, and I know I complained a little bit about the timing, but that's kind of what I do, so I'm used to it. What I think that the teaching and learning strategies, because we were trying to compress our schedule at that time, I think there wasn't enough time to give the praise for this that it merits, because we just went through a hellish year. And this is a summary of everything that the district did to turn lemons into lemonade. And every district doesn't have this, and that recommendation that this show can go on the road and people want to pay for it. This is the work this is the advice they called for. So, we were trying to in the morning and go to lunch, and we said, oh, that's great, you guys are awesome, but you guys are really awesome because this right here, there's a lot of districts that wish they knew how to do this.
Thank you. I'd like to say I'm much more hopeful this afternoon than I was this morning. I am. I actually am.
I'm sorry you missed me.
I'm sure that was part of it. I really feel, if someone were to say, what's the most important position in the district other than the superintendent? A lot of people would probably say the chief financial officer, who deals with all the money and stuff. I continue to believe that it's human resources. And I think all of our discussions today, all of our comments today point to the fact that that's the hub. That's where our success is going to be determined most, what comes out of that human resources department. So I think we're correct to laser focus on that and to try to build it up and do everything we can to make sure that we're getting the most out of it that we can. But I am very hopeful.
As I was saying in my last little breakout session over there, I can get in the weeds to talk about each one of these goals for hours. I know we all could, so I'm glad that we had it kind of limited because, just the 9 of us, we all most like to talk about others, so we all do like to talk. We all elected, and that's kind of what we had to do. So I really appreciate how it was set up, especially with the learning, the teaching and learning aspect of it, and then also with the human resources, because those are two big behemoth areas to have an overview of that. So I appreciate what your staff has done working with Dr. Bob to make this happen.
I would like to thank Academic Affairs and the district for continuing to try to meet our families where they want to be met. I know it's not always front page news, and we can't make everyone 100% happy 100% of the time, but it is reassuring to know that the first answer is never just no, that it's always how could we, and then can we, and then how are we going to make it happen, and that it just makes it a lot easier when you talk to a parent to say, we're trying, and there's 37,000 students, and we can't make 37,000 plans.
but we have a lot more than just one. And that's just allows me to know that we're always trying. And I'm thankful that we have teachers and staff at each of the schools that is willing them to say, okay, let's try. How can we, whether it be dual teaching one day, or as Mr. Ramon would say, 2 weeks of this, oh, now I'm back in my classroom, my whole class is back from quarantine, how long is this, and when the telephone comes that they have to change, thank you to those teachers that do that. Thank you to the bus drivers that are having to figure out how much earlier they need to come, or later they need to stay. And it just seems like that starts at the top. It's not just a job. So thank you. It's always helpful to reground to that it's for the kids and how can we make it happen.
Thank you, Dr. Burns.
Well, when I was younger, I used to have a lot to say. Oh my goodness. But I would like to take this opportunity to join my colleagues and say thank you to Dr. Lizette and her administrative team and all the work that you do and continue to do. I appreciate you. And I wish, on the other hand, that many parents could at least appreciate what's going on during this turbulent time of what you're doing. So I would just like to continue to encourage you to move forward. Your main focus really are the kids, children. And we're not doing anything to help their lives be more successful if we're not about the right thing. So continue what you're doing. Ignore those parents that are crazy, and we'll still pray for them. But thank you so much.
Also have to thank you. I know that there's a tremendous amount of work that goes into producing a day like this. So thank you to everyone who made this happen. This to me is, I think, what's so awesome about the opportunity to serve on this board. Obviously board meetings are very important, but this is where we really have the opportunity to look at the big picture, and it's so valuable. And I really appreciate the opportunity to work with some of the other staff that I may not have known as well before, and to break out the groups for Mr. Childers, which was great. Very well. But it was fantastic, and that's where I learned so much from the diverse personalities in the district and all your experience and perspective. And to me, it's very rewarding because I think it helps me to be a better board member. And so I really appreciate everything that went into this, and I look forward to our discussion tomorrow. And I think that it's really easy to focus on the negative, and that's kind of human nature. When people are happy, they tend to be quiet. But I got an email just yesterday from a resident who lives in District 1, and he said, I've reached out to you before when I was complaining and frustrated, so I'm going to reach out to you again now to express gratitude. And it was really, and I wrote back to him and I said, thank you for that, because that's human nature, is to respond when you're frustrated or when you're angry. And I've gotten many of those, and I know several of us have gotten some of those through these really tumultuous, those kind of silent majority. So as easy as it is to focus on the naysayers, and I do think that's something we have an opportunity to work on, I do know that we have support and we have champions in the community, and we should always be mindful of those folks and work with them, just carry forward generously. So thank you for this, and I look forward to it. Oh, sorry, one more thing I did want to say. I know this takes a lot of work, but I would love for us to maybe consider maybe a mini 6-month follow-up, because when we only do it once a year, I know it's time, and I know it's a commitment, and maybe it doesn't need to be everyone here, but there's a different way to do it, but the return on the time invested to me is that's just what I am.
We have had generally one in January as well. So we at least try to do 2 weeks. It's helpful for us, I would say that.
And maybe the new sessions that we did prior, during the accreditation. You know, maybe go back to some morning pre-session, pre-meeting session.
I agree.
I just want to thank the folks in your office and in the board office, Michelle and Mary and Olivia and Katie, who made sure all of this was taken care of, and as I started the day out this morning, I said how much I like to come out here because it belongs to us. And it's sort of like our home, in my opinion. And I thought this was a particularly good retreat. We've had some good ones along the way, and some not so good, in my opinion, but I thought this was a good one. I appreciate the staff. I appreciate the fact that we got to hear each other. And sometimes we don't always listen to each other. So thank you for that.
Okay. Any other closing comments for today? We try to stick with our 3 o'clock.
I'd like it sometime for you to have an in-service for us on the growth mindset. I think that's really important for us to understand. And you alluded to it for a little, but I think we really all need to hear that. Sean had mentioned it this morning in terms of the budget, have a growth-minded attitude. So I'd like us to explore that a bit more.
And we were just so cool, and everyone else, we spent a lot of time talking about our schools that are not performing at the level that we like for them to perform. And we also talked about the fact that some of our children may be sitting in classrooms where they are at a certain place at the beginning of the year and they're at the same place at the end of the year. So no growth is happening. And when we look at a real analysis of growth at each school, we found lots of places where children are not growing. And they're often the high-performing schools, but we're not seeing growth there. And we want to see that happen as well. So we appreciate the opportunity to have a big conversation about that. So for tomorrow, you dedicate your homework. Homework.
Parents will be given at 9 o'clock.
Hands on. So you get your homework, we'll give you a little preview of that, and if there are no other comments, this is the day
Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah.